All right. Here we go. Doug, Mary Kay, can you hear me?
Yes.
I can hear you.
All right. Perfect. We are underway here on our draft coverage. Let's recap everything that has happened so far for those of you that have joined us. It was Trevor Lawrence, as expected, going number 1 overall, then Zach Wilson, Trey Lance, Kyle Pitts, Jamar Chase. So that's the first 5 picks. We're waiting on the Miami Dolphins here. Of course, we're going to be a little bit delayed as we go along here on the stream. That's just how it works. So when we look at Tim Belix, if I can find it here, I'm toggling my share screen. Our best players available, Justin Fields. He's going to certainly be a topic of conversation as we go along here. We're going to have Steven Means and Nathan Baird come on a little bit later. But the focus right now is going to be working towards the Cleveland Browns. And I bring on Doug Maurice and Mary Kay Cabot. I'll stop sharing my screen here. Doug and Mary Kay, how are you?
Doing great.
Okay, so real quick, let's just recap what we've seen. Any big surprises so far for either of you?
You know what? Let me just say that, you kind of had to know that it was going to be Trey Lance for the 49ers. It just didn't seem like they were trading up to get a Mac Jones who was just going to be too much like a Jimmy Garoppolo. We talked about this on our pod yesterday. It needed to be Trey Lance. They needed to do something different if they were going to spend all of that capital. And it also just goes to show you that NFL types will lie to their grandmother before the NFL draft to send up those smoke screens.
I do think that changes the draft for Justin Fields, as we talked about on the pod, that I think Mac Jones might fall now. If I had to guess, I guess that Justin Fields is the next quarterback off the board. The Dolphins just took Jalen Waddle at number 6. So maybe here at 7 with the Detroit Lions pick or someone trading up to that pick, I think we enter Justin Fields territory. So I think Lance going 3 is good news for Justin Fields. But I think for the Browns, I think Jamar Chase at 5 for the Bengals was the right pick for them. Mm-hmm. I know Tim Bielek picked Penei Sewell at 5 for the Bengals in our mock draft. I thought Tim was wrong in the moment, and he turned out to be wrong. You've got to get a skill guy like that, and they can circle back for the tackle at the top of the second round. And I know the Browns aren't playing matchup with the Bengals, but Chase Claypool in Pittsburgh, right? Sammy Watkins in Baltimore now. Jamar Chase is like another, this is like a pass catcher with a little bit of size, right? A lot of us think the Browns are headed toward a corner. Jamar Chase going to the Bengals at 5 does not change the Browns draft strategy, but someone's got to cover Jamar Chase twice a year for the next 6 to 8 years. And it might not be a bad idea for the Browns to get somebody who can do that.
You know what? I agree with you 100%. The minute they picked Jamar Chase, I was thinking, okay, Denzel, it's go time for you, and Cleveland Browns, you better go get yourselves another really good starting cornerback, because you are going to need him with Joe and Jamar. I mean, those guys are going to be dynamite together.
Well, and that's one of the things we're going to watch here as we start to get into, I guess, the meat of this draft now. This is where some of those corners could start to go. And so we've got to keep an eye on that as we go along. Because, when we did our mock yesterday, or I posted today on the Orange and Brown Talk feed, when we did the mock, it was the corners were gone by about 16, 17? They were gone. So if that's how it plays out tonight, the Browns might not be able to get one of these top corners at 26.
I think it depends where you draw the line at the corners. I mean, I think everybody seems to see those top 4. I think it depends what you think of Asante Samuel and Tyson Campbell and Eric Stokes and some of these other guys who are the 5th, 6th, 7th corners in this draft. Maybe I just do think it's a tough world. Horn and Surtain are not going to get to them. And it just seems much more difficult as time has gone on for Greg Newsome and Caleb Farley to get to them. And Mary Kay, it's one of those things where I know you did the national beat writer mock draft with the LA Times, right? Where you ended up picking Caleb Farley, I think, in that draft for the Browns at 26. There's almost a part of me, Mary Kay, that if Farley gets to 26, it almost makes you nervous because it's like, well, what are the medicals on this guy? Because Greedy was there at 37 the year the Browns took him. And guess what? Greedy had some health stuff that reared its head once he got to the NFL, right? I mean, I'm not saying I wouldn't take Caleb Farley at 26, but skill-wise, he's better than that. If he gets to the Browns, it's because something's a little hinky. Unless I'm looking, am I thinking too much about it?
No, not at all. I mean, really, you have to really take a look at the fact that he had the one back surgery and then he had to have another back surgery because they thought it could heal without the second surgery and it didn't. And that is a little bit scary coming off of Grant Delpit and Greedy Williams. However, if he does fall to 26, I still think it's probably a risk worth taking, even though it is a risk. It's not a risk at number 10. You can survive and you can overcome it if you screw that up and he doesn't end up being everything that you need him to be. I still think the upside is so tremendous with him. I mean, there are some people that think he is as good as Patrick and or better than Patrick. And if you can take a risk and get him at 26, I think I would do it. I would go ahead and I would pull the trigger there.
I do think it becomes one of these things as the Browns become one of these good teams where they aren't drafting from desperation, where they don't have gaping holes, where they can just take people who will help them down the line. I don't know. I guess that opens the window on rolling the dice a little more, right? That it's not the end of the franchise if you miss at 26. But if you take a guy at 26 who has top 15 talent at a premium position and you hit, sometimes because you're strong, you can take more risks. I don't know. But then part of me thinks like, well, if you're trying to win a Super Bowl this year, do you want a sure thing that you know can help you right now? I can get conflicted on that, but I can buy the idea of the Browns are actually positioned to roll the dice on talent, injury, question mark, fall in our lap, boom, Caleb Farley's a Brown.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, as you mentioned, I mean, if he is there, it is because other people were like, no, we're worried about this. But they don't need him to be the the final piece to the puzzle this year. That's not what they're looking at him to be. Now, I would think that he will be, I think he'll start. I mean, if your first round picks start, as long as he's healthy, he will come in and I believe that he will start. That's what you do with first round picks generally. Okay. Now, maybe not the first game, maybe not even the second game, but that is, in my experience, that has been the plan. And I think he's got the talent and the ability to do it. Once again, some people thought he was, or think he is the best cornerback in the draft, which would mean he was sort of in the Denzel Ward range, right? In terms of ability and talent. And, you don't wait for guys like that to develop and to get good. I mean, you just throw him in there and you play him. So I think that would be the situation here. But by the same token, they don't have to have him start right away.
Well, the Lions did not take a corner. They took Penei Sewell out of Oregon, a guy that as we've mentioned, a lot of people thought maybe would have ended up in Cincinnati, but the Bengals went with the wide receiver. So the Lions go with a tackle. Kind of an interesting pick there for Detroit to try and protect Jared Goff. They decided not to go with the quarterback. And of course, that means that Justin Fields is still on the board. I mentioned Stephen Means and Nathan Baird will be jumping on here in a little bit to talk Justin Fields. If he's been picked by then or not, we will find out. So we're on to pick number 8 here in the draft moving forward. But that just means, look, every team that doesn't take a corner at this point, that to me, that's good for the Browns, unless, they're going to shock us and they're targeting somebody like Zaven Collins.
And I think the other two positions you want to see a lack of corners ahead of the Browns. And I think you want to see offensive tackles go off the board and you want to see running backs go off the board because the Browns have no interest in any of those guys in the first round. So that Jenkins guy, you want him drafted ahead of the Browns. Vera Tucker from USC, you want him drafted ahead of the Browns. So more of the potential options on defense, maybe one of the receivers falls to them. So root for tackles and running backs. But I do want to make sure we talk about we talked about on the mock draft that we did, that we're in the Justin Fields zone now. When Nathan and Steven and I on Buckeye Talk did our predictions about where Justin Fields would be picked, we already missed. We're already wrong. We already had someone trading up either to 6 or 7. All three of us said that to come get Justin Fields. The Lions did not trade out. Chris Spielman, the former Ohio State great, one of the decision makers there. The Lions did not trade out. Maybe they were surprised Sewell fell to them and they wanted to take him. But I think this is the area where it would happen. Carolina at 8, but Mary Kay, the complicating factor, the monkey wrench thrown into this entire draft is a lot of people thought the Denver Broncos at 9 would be looking for a quarterback, but now the reports are maybe the quarterback they're going to find is Aaron Rodgers, and that changes everything. I don't know if that means would Green Bay be in the market for a quarterback, or does that open the Jordan Love era in Green Bay? But if that is a top 10 team answering a quarterback need, then Justin Fields and Mac Jones are both affected by that, because Denver is not going to go forward with Drew Lock for very much longer. So I know Mark Schlereth out in Denver is the guy who's reporting that deal might be close to happening. Mary Kay, when you hear something like that, are you dumbfounded by the idea of that? But then the reports are coming out. No, Green Bay saying, no, we're going to call his bluff. We're not going to trade him. There's a lot happening here, not with the draft, that is affecting the draft. Could you imagine, Mary Kay, Aaron Rodgers actually being dealt?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I mean, this was the year of the quarterback carousel, even though it was shocking news that came out today. Once the cat was out of the bag, at this point now, it's almost hard to put that back in. It's hard to go home again after something like that. So that would not surprise me in any way, shape, or form if he is dealt. That obviously rocked the NFL world today to hear that. It had everybody's wheels spinning in so many cities. Of course, there are not a million cities that he would like to play in, but yes, it did. It did shake everything up. So yes, I could see something like that happening. And it looks like Carolina's pick is in. Have you guys seen who it is yet? I'm wondering. I'm very curious here what they're doing.
Well, this is where you had Justin Fields mocked.
Exactly. Because you know what? I thought, who would you rather have? Just Justin Fields or Sam Darnold? I mean, you're going to go with Justin Fields there. This is the wave of the future. This is what people want and are looking for. And I don't think he should go past here. I really don't. I don't think you should put all your eggs in Sam Darnold's basket if you have an opportunity to get Justin Fields here. I would do it. I don't know what they're going to do. The pick is in, but if they don't do it, they might regret it.
Now, for those of you watching on our stream, just a reminder, when you're getting this stream, you're going to be about 30 seconds behind real time. So if you already know who the Panthers picked, we probably do too, but you aren't seeing it on the stream because there is a little bit of a delay between what we say in real time and what pops up on YouTube as we await that Panthers pick. I mean, Doug, if these next two.
Oh, it's JC. I'm seeing that it's JC Horn.
Okay.
So
Fields is past this pick. And of course, that's the first corner off the board, which is very important. So now if he gets past Denver, what are we looking at for Fields, do you think?
I mean, I think if he gets past Denver, then you start really getting in the range of a team like the Patriots or the Bears who could trade up and come get him. Or the Patriots, again, if they see both quarterbacks falling. And again, when we had Phil Perry from NBC Sports Boston on Buckeye Talk earlier in the week, he indicated, I think, that the Patriots like Mac Jones and Justin Fields. I don't know if the Patriots would be comfortable with saying, let's see who gets to us. We'll take the quarterback that gets to us at 15. We don't want to give up any capital to go up and get it. Tim Bielik and I think, are on the same page of it. Feels like the Chicago Bears, they have a coach and a GM who I think are on the hot seat. Are they really going to sit and let their quarterback situation remain as is? Or are they going to do something about it? I think every time a pick goes and it's not a quarterback, it makes it a little more palatable for a team to jump up and get it. But if the two quarterbacks fall together, right? I don't know. Maybe people just say, well, as long as I can get one of the two, I'm still okay with that. But you are going to enter this realm here in a little bit where you're going to find some teams, the Chargers aren't going to take a quarterback. The Vikings aren't going to take a quarterback. The Cowboys aren't going to take a quarterback, right? When you start getting into those early teams, well, the teams who are there aren't going to draft Justin Fields. So if somebody doesn't come up and get him, then he'll start to fall.
A quarterback trumps a cornerback any day of the week. A franchise quarterback blows away a cornerback. If you have an opportunity to get a guy that can change your entire franchise, I don't know. Don't you think they should have taken him here, Doug?
Well, it depends. Oh, go ahead, Doug.
Well, it's just, they did give up a second, a fourth, and a sixth for Darnold. They did give up capital to get Darnold. I could imagine it though. Hey, we'll give this up for Darnold, but we didn't know Justin Fields was going to fall to us. So now we'll take him, right? So why be beholden to your old move, right? Don't be pulled down by that.
No.
But I also do, Sam Darnold's pretty young, right? He was young when he was drafted. If you think that's just a guy who is in the worst situation possible, and you know how it is, Mary Kay, coaches think they can fix everybody. Adam Gase, he sucked for him, but he'll be great for me because I'm Matt Rule and I'm a genius.
Right.
I'm Joe Brady. We got Joe Brady. Joe Brady's a genius. People think that way sometimes. So there are teams that now Denver's sitting here at 9. Now, again, this is a pivot point again. Mm-hmm. If you're Denver and you have Justin Fields. If you're not going to trade for Aaron Rodgers, what are you going to take a tackle when Justin Fields is sitting here? You take a corner. Really, is that what the problem is? This now that Justin Fields, if it's not going to be Aaron Rodgers, then Justin Fields to Denver right here at 9. Dan, that feels right to me. And I know a lot of people along the way, whether it was a trade up or sitting and waiting, have thought Justin Fields might be a Bronco.
Well, and all these teams are telling us what they think of Justin Fields as we go along here. And, time will tell if they regret that or not. Because obviously the Lions, they probably need a quarterback. I know they have Jared Goff, but they probably need a quarterback and they didn't take him. We just saw Carolina. They didn't take him. But now Denver is kind of that first team where it's like, there's no real backup plan, right? The Lions can start Jared Goff. The Panthers can say Sam Darnold's their guy. The Broncos don't really have that, like you were saying. So we're going to start to find out now really what these teams think of Justin Fields, because if he's that good and they believe he's that good, then you do not pass on him if you need a quarterback. And I could actually make that case for the Lions too. If they believe he's that good, you can't pass on him, whether you have Jared Goff or whether you think you're ready to take a quarterback or not. If that guy's there and you believe he's that good, you got to take it.
And we talked about this on Bucket.
And obviously they didn't believe that
when we were trying to analyze what teams might do. I don't think the quarterback draft class for next year, as it stands now, listen, there's somebody that jumps up every year, right? Nobody thought Zach Wilson a year ago was going to be the second pick in this draft. Somebody always comes out of nowhere. But right now, when you look at Sam Howell from North Carolina, Spencer Rattler from Oklahoma, JT Daniels from Georgia, Keaton Slovis from USC, there's a couple of the guys. It doesn't feel like the world's strongest draft class to me. A year ago, you would have said Trevor Lawrence, Justin Fields, right? You knew those guys were going to be here in this class. There's not a Trevor Lawrence, it looks like to me. Sam Howell's pretty darn good. So to me, that would influence, okay, if you're one of these teams that's building, and we saw this with the Browns, right? The Browns could have taken a quarterback the year they took Myles Garrett. They didn't. They waited, right? They could have taken a quarterback a million different times. They could have taken Carson Wentz or Jared Goff. They didn't do that. We know that. Sometimes when you're building, I do understand waiting to get the quarterback at the end of the build. So Carolina, Matt Rule, he's not going anywhere. Maybe they take a shot with Darnold. If not, they'll get a quarterback in a year or two. Chris Spielman and Brad Holmes, they just got put in charge. Dan Campbell, they're new in Detroit. They don't have to try Jared Goff. Try it out, build, get the quarterback at the end of the build. Vic Fangio, I feel like Denver is a little bit of hey, you're pretty good. I think Denver should be better than they are. They might be a quarterback away from making a jump right now. And then again, now you have the teams who could trade up and say a quarterback right now, we slide them right in and we can get a lot better. So that's where I think New England and Chicago and some of these other teams come in. But if I were Denver, who's going to do more for you? Rashawn Slater Patrick Surtain, Devontae Smith, or Justin Fields. Like Mary Kay, you keep it to me, to you, it doesn't even seem like a choice at all.
No, not at all. Absolutely not at all.
Let's pivot back to the Browns a little bit here. With JC Horn off the board, I would imagine Dallas is going to take a corner here coming up. Mary Kay, at what point do we reach a spot where we have to realistically think about the Browns possibly just trading out of the first round?
Well, it is definitely a possibility. It's definitely a possibility, but I think they have some good choices. I think they're going to find what they want at 26. I think from all the things that we have discussed, I think we've kind of been on who we think are some of the strong possibilities there. And I think for the most part, that has remained the same. There are two people that I'm very intrigued by. One of them is JOK, the Notre Dame linebacker. Very intrigued by him. I think he is a strong possibility there because some of the other guys that I think that are on the list are going to be gone. I talked to somebody today that told me that he thought Zaven Collins, who is also on their radar, would be gone by number 16. So that seems to be where he's going to bottom out. I still think Caleb Farley is definitely on the list. I think Greg Newsome is somebody that we should watch for. Now, of course, both of those guys could possibly be gone. And as we mentioned, that brings you into the next tier of quarterbacks. I'm a little surprised that Patrick wasn't the first cornerback off the board. So, these are some of the things we've been talking about. I do think that there are, I think a number of the pass rushers are still in play. We've talked about this a lot. They all have their issues. They have their issues, but nevertheless, there are a number of guys that we know they've spent considerable time on, and I think some of those guys could possibly be available. So start watching the pass rushers and see what's going on here. I mean, we've talked about the Azizes and the Kwity Pays and the Greg Rousseaus and some of those guys. So I think these are people to keep an eye on. From a receiver standpoint, I still think that's in play. I think we got to keep an eye on the receivers. Do not rule out a receiver to the Browns at number 26. We've talked about a number of them. I think, and the one that Tim Bielek, didn't Tim pick Elijah Moore for them today in his mock? I mean, that's just such an intriguing possibility. We're hearing the Broncos pick.
Dan, I do think that when we did our mock, we had the corners go at 10, 12, 14, 16, and we were kind of like, hey, man, the corners started going quick. The first corner coming off the board at 8 is not maybe great news, right?
Another one just came off the board with Patrick Surtain going to the Broncos. So this is starting to play out. If the Browns wanted a corner, this is starting to not go in their favor unless they want to get aggressive and maybe try and move up to get somebody. And when we talk about that number 26 pick and these edge rushers that maybe have some issues, some corners that are maybe more second round guys, that's why I start to wonder if there's somebody, and I don't know if any of these teams in the top 8 to 10 of the second round would trade with you. I don't know. But I do start to wonder if the Browns are looking at that and saying, you know what, let's get somebody in the second round. We've talked about how valuable that 5th round option or that 5th year option is, but I downside to it because it's guaranteed now. You start taking a guy at 26 who's maybe a second round talent. I don't know. Do you want to make that decision or do you want to maybe not commit yourself to that 5th year option that you have to decide on after year 3? You don't get to wait till year 4. So I wonder if I want to see how teams kind of approach that. Yeah. So I think this gets very interesting as more corners come off the board and you start to get into an area where an edge rusher at 26 versus an edge rusher at like 40. How much difference is there?
Well, I agree. There is a chance they could trade out if they think they can get one of their guys later. But, if we do start to see a little bit of a run on cornerbacks, that's going to hurt them. I think that's going to hurt them because I really do think that they would love to come out of here with the cornerback. And the way this is going, I think somebody is going to take a chance on Caleb Farley before they get a chance to get to him. Cornerbacks are too valuable. He's too good. It's going to be hard for him to last that long. You might get down into more of the Asante Samuel range at number 26. I still think they would do that there. Don't know what you guys think about that choice, but I think it's something to try to keep an eye on as we go along here.
I mean, I don't think there ever could have been a plan by them to think that Greg Newsome or Caleb Farley would get to 26. I do think that's where you enter the realm of, do you give up one of your thirds to move up 4 or 5 spots to as far, to where you think you need to go to get him. So again, I don't think we ever thought Newsome and Farley were going to get to the Browns, but given that there's 2 corners in the top 9, it lessens the chances of Farley and Newsome getting to the Browns. Like if you're hoping that, but as soon as one position goes, listen, right? No linebackers yet. So if Micah Parsons falls a little bit, maybe that pushes JOK down. Maybe that pushes Zaven Collins down. Maybe one of those guys is there that you didn't expect. Devontae Smith, that in our mock, Ellis Williams took at 6. He's on the board. The further Devontae Smith goes down, he pushes Elijah Moore and Rashad Bateman down, right? And now maybe all of a sudden they come more into play for the Browns at 26. So I do think, listen, there's a couple spots where I think, we know there's positional value. And we just don't think maybe they'll take a defensive tackle, or there's some spots we don't think they'll take there. I think they'll have somebody they like. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think it would have to be like when I did my imaginary little thing, it was like, I think there's a realm of like 10 guys they could consider, and there should be 3 or 4 in the mix for them, unless like everything goes against them. And it's like, oh man, like everybody you liked got taken. So I still might be a little bit more inclined to a trade up than a trade down, that if they see there's one guy we love, we got to go to 21. I still think that might be what that extra third rounder can do for you.
And
Dallas might end up trading out of number 10 here, which kind of tells you like this was a team. Yeah, the Eagles are going to trade up with the Cowboys, which tells you, I mean, the Cowboys were linked to Surtain. And that makes you think like, okay, these teams that maybe had corners in mind, they're starting to try and look for value now with these picks, because this draft is just so wonky the later you get. And that's probably what the Cowboys are thinking here as they trade down with the Eagles at number 10. Go ahead, Mary Kay.
Just real quick, because I'm going to have to jump off here and, try to start anticipating the Browns pick. But I do agree with you, Doug, that there's probably a good chance that Newsome and Farley could be gone. However, keep in mind the injury factor makes Caleb possible, where he probably wouldn't have been. So I think that's, even though he probably won't end up there, who knows? There might be enough teams that are just scared off enough by those back surgeries that there is a slight chance that he could be there. And I'm going to jump off, and I will talk to you guys later.
All right. Good luck, Mary Kay.
All right. Thanks.
Dan, it's interesting to see this intra-divisional trade here. This is like the Browns and the Steelers making a trade. That if you're making a trade like this, I think a lot of people, almost every mock you saw had the Cowboys at 10 taking a cornerback. And I think a lot of those mocks, it was the first corner off the board. And sometimes people had them taking Surtain, sometimes they had them taking Horn, and they're both gone. So now here the Eagles, who were at 6, they traded down to 12 to get that pick when Miami was moving around. Now they want to jump from 12 to 10, and Dallas is okay with helping them. So I have to imagine maybe this is Devontae Smith, that maybe this is the playmaker for the Eagles. They don't know that they were worried he would go at 11. The Cowboys aren't really thinking receiver. They'll take whatever they're getting out of this trade. They're getting a third rounder. They're getting a third round pick to go down 2 spots. Let the Eagles come up and get the receiver, and they'll still get who they want at 12. Or I don't think the Eagles are coming up to get Justin Fields here. I mean, they don't have Carson Wentz anymore, right? I mean, they have Jalen Hurts. They could make a competition there, but I would guess this might be Devontae Smith.
Yeah, I don't think they're coming up here to get Fields. I think they're willing to have Hurts compete with somebody if they even bring somebody else in. I mean, they'd have to. I mean, to me, if you take a quarterback at 10, you're taking that guy to start. And I guess you could maybe have him sit on the bench for a little while, but you're not bringing him in to compete and lose the job. So especially to a guy you drafted in the second round last year. So I don't know that I could see that happening. And what would be interesting is if Philadelphia takes a corner here. If Dallas just didn't like who was left at corner, if they wanted Surtain, he wasn't there, and then the Eagles liked one of these guys that was there, if they maybe decided to jump up and grab one of these corners, that might be something to watch too.
And it is, I mean, I you can't be beholden. You have to do what you want to do, right? You can't worry too much about in your division and not in your division, but you have 3 NFC East teams lined up here. That it was Dallas, the Giants, and the Eagles. So Dallas just traded with the Eagles so the Eagles could jump the Giants because the Eagles were clearly worried that the Giants were going to take the guy that they wanted. So the Cowboys just conspired with the Eagles to stick it to the Giants. And given where people were projecting things for the Giants, I have to think that's Philadelphia thinking the Giants were going to take a receiver for Daniel Jones. Waddle and Chase are gone. The last great receiver available is Devontae Smith and Dallas. This is like the enemy of my enemy is my friend kind of thing here. Dave Gettleman's like, what are you doing to me? I think this is going to be Devontae Smith. And then now we get into what are the Giants going to do? I don't know. Maybe the Giants will trade down for somebody who wants to come get a quarterback. And now we can welcome Nathan Baird, when we were planning this draft live stream, first of all, we thought the draft would start at 8:00, but they had the Kings of Leon sing their one song 4 different times, I think, and delayed the start of the draft until 8:15. And then Justin Fields has not gone. And we all, Nathan, thought that he would go in the top 10, and he didn't go in the top 10. What do you think of that?
Well, it's not really surprising that any of the teams have not selected him, I guess, to this point. I think as we analyzed this, we thought there were legitimate reasons for really every one of those other teams to take someone else, although we were of the opinion that some of the teams that were drafting quarterbacks should take Justin Fields instead of the quarterbacks they took. However, I'm a little bit surprised that nobody has traded up. I mean, both you and I, when we were doing this on the Buckeye Talk podcast, both picked teams to trade up and take Fields around that 6-7 mark. I thought definitely a team like Detroit might trade down, but I don't think I didn't expect Penei Sewell to still be there. So a lot of different things are kind of factoring in why he keeps sliding down the first round.
Dan, this is one of those.
Almost, sorry, I would ask you guys this. I mean, is this almost a good situation for Justin Fields? I always believe, like with some of these quarterbacks that get drafted high, you end up with this team that's a mess, right? Like, are we sure the Jets are going to be good for Zach Wilson? I don't know. Justin Fields might end up, falling might be a good thing for him because he might end up in just a fantastic situation.
No, I think that's a very good point, that you don't have to be part of a rebuild. I mean, look at, for instance, like Denver, which is a team that I had picked, might try to trade up and get him or just even take him at 9, a place that is, I think, in a very, has to win soon situation. If they can't win with the quarterbacks that they have, you might be looking at some kind of regime change there. And then now you've got to start all over. And now you're a guy who's 2 years in, maybe dealing with the second, offensive coordinator, second coach. I think you're right that, the farther down you fall, it's bad for your checkbook, I guess, bad for your wallet, but it's not necessarily bad for how quickly you could potentially win in the NFL if you do your part and get out on the field and play well.
I always am a little surprised, Dan, that when teams, it is Devontae Smith to Philadelphia, jumping the Giants to stick it to Dave Gettleman. I think that's a good pick for Philadelphia. I think they're happy with that. I'm a little surprised when teams leave their quarterback future to chance, right? I like the idea of we like a guy, we're going to go get our guy. It's the thing that the Browns didn't do for a decade. It was like, oh, Brady Quinn fell to him. Oh, Johnny Manziel fell to him. Oh, Brandon Weeden fell to him. Oh, Colt McCoy in the 3rd round. You never decide to be in control of your quarterback destiny when it's the whole thing. It's the whole thing. And it boggles my mind that teams are passive and allow things to happen to them instead of making things happen. However, so I still think, we're not that far yet. Let's remember, Patrick Mahomes, 10th pick, Deshaun Watson, 12th pick, both to teams that came up and got them. Right? That kind of were winning teams that came up and got him. Justin Fields could absolutely still have that happen, but I'm just still surprised that teams don't jump up and seize the day. Who cares? Throw in a second rounder. Who cares? Seize the day.
I think it's happening. I think Adam Schefter is reporting that Chicago is trading up from number 20 to 11. And that seems like, as someone who watches a lot of Chicago Bears football, that seems like a prime place for a quarterback to be taken.
So Gettleman just got Jerry Jones. Howie Roseman and Jerry Jones just took Dave Gettleman in the back alley and mugged him. And Dave Gettleman, and now here comes Ryan. Who's the guy? Nathan, Ryan Pace. Is he the Bears GM? Ryan Pace and Matt Nagy are coming into the alley. Dave, are you okay? And they're picking him up. They're brushing him off. And they're going to take him for a cup of coffee. And they're going to make everything okay. And this is the team that I thought would jump to get Justin Fields. I thought it had him jumping to 6. They only have to jump to 11. It is desperation in action. Now, we don't know that it's Justin Fields yet. It might be Mac Jones. But Dan, I like desperation sometimes. Right? Well, like it makes you act.
You have to be bold. You have to be bold sometimes.
Right. If you're a Bears fan, though, you're thinking back to when you traded up to number 2. Similar situation, actually. You signed Mike Glennon to this big contract, and then you traded up and drafted Mitchell Trubisky. You've got to get it right when you are bold and when you do trade up. But yes, I mean, Chicago needs a quarterback. They can't just be happy with Andy Dalton. And I know they trotted Dalton out and said, he's our guy, he's our starter, but you've got to, if you've got a chance to get a guy here that you think can be your starter long-term, you've got to do it if you're the Bears, because that team is actually ready to be pretty good now. They've got a good defense. They can do some things there if they can figure out that quarterback position.
It's the thing that I wrote about with the Browns, that you build a team to slide a quarterback in. And if the quarterback doesn't work, the team is still built for it. So don't hesitate. Slide in another guy you believe in as soon as possible. Don't let the Trubisky mistake keep you from being bold the next time, Nathan. Just be bold again. Be bold until you're right.
Yeah, I mean, the Trubisky thing, it's a vicious cycle, right? Because the Trubisky thing was an overreach. I mean, if all accounts, they may have been negotiating against themselves to trade up the way they did and give up a lot to do it. And that's one of the reasons, not only his bad play, but probably cost you some other draft capital that could have helped you not be in the position you are right now, which is drafting, higher than they wanted to be, and not being a team that's going really any place deep in the playoffs or anything like that. So now it is the vicious cycle. You really have to hit this next one. I mean, and for this whole coaching staff, for this whole organization, I mean, it's a bunch of guys who know if they don't hit this, then they're done. They're gone. And like I was saying before about Denver, now you're bringing in just a whole new group.
And there's whatever they're giving up, and I don't know if it's out yet what the Bears have given up to move up.
Looked like a fifth this year and a fourth next year.
The first next year as well.
A fifth, a 2022 first and a 2022 fourth. So they gave up a lot.
So it's extraneous stuff. It's basically an extra first, which is what it takes when the Texans traded up with the Browns to get Deshaun Watson. They gave up next year's first. When the Chiefs traded up with the Bills to get Patrick Mahomes, they gave up next year's first. When you're going to make a move of this many spots, right? 8 to 10 spots, 8 to 12 spots, especially if it's for a quarterback, it's going to cost you next year's first, but who cares? Allen Robinson, right? They franchised Allen Robinson. Allen Robinson's a great receiver who's banging his head against a wall in Chicago because he doesn't have a quarterback. Who is it?
It's Fields to the Bears.
It's Fields to the Bears.
No.
At 11.
I don't want to make too much of things that don't matter. Matt Nagy and Ryan Day were Division I AA quarterbacks in the same conference back in the day. Matt Nagy playing at Delaware, Ryan Day playing at New Hampshire. They know each other a little bit. That's not why you draft the guy. But Matt Nagy is a quarterback guy. Ryan Day is a quarterback guy. They're about the same age. They're from the same kind of football. I'm sure they've had conversations about this. And I would imagine that the Bears probably think they got the fourth quarterback in this draft. Justin Fields might be 2 on their board. There are definitely teams out there that had Justin Fields 2 on their board. This is exactly the move, Nathan, that we thought would be made. We were a little off on the timing, but we said we think it will be someone coming to get him. And that now, listen, this is a little bit of the opposite of what we say. Hey, go to a great situation. It's like, I don't know if the Bears are a great situation. It's a great defense, right? They were in the playoffs a couple of years ago. It's not complete. It's not on fire. He could be a savior there, but Nathan, there's gonna be a lot of pressure on him in Chicago too.
Absolutely, and it can be a tough place to play. And like I was saying, I think on the pod the other day too, somebody had put out, I think it might have been Scott Docterman, another Bears fan in the Big Ten media who covers Iowa. I think he put out a long chart of like going back now, however many years of Chicago Bears football, and they've had, I think, 2 Pro Bowl quarterbacks. I think in the entire history of your franchise, I think 2 Pro Bowl quarterbacks, which is just insane. So it's been a mismatch between potentially like storied elite franchise and failure to ever solve that most important position in the sport. And this is their latest chance to try to rectify that.
Dan, given Dan what you know about the Browns, when you see a team make a move for a quarterback, like are you hesitating at all, Dan, about this move for the Bears, or does this feel like, yes, go get your guy?
I think if you're the Bears, you got to go get your guy. I mean, they tried to get Russell Wilson. So obviously this is a team that wanted to fix this quarterback position. And you can't just sign Andy Dalton and say, all right, here's our guy, let's go. I mean, Ryan Pace and Matt Nagy might be fighting for their jobs this season. So you've got to go get your quarterback. And like you said, Doug, if they think he's the second best quarterback in this draft, and maybe they do based on the fact they gave up that first round pick next year, you got to go get him. You have to, because this is your opportunity. And I have no problem with this. This is a great move by the Bears, I think.
And Andy Dalton becomes mentor / bridge. Do you start Andy Dalton for a month or whatever? I don't know, maybe. Or maybe you just put Justin Fields in and you have Andy Dalton, who's been a playoff quarterback, who's been around, help Justin Fields acclimate to this. I think that in the end, Nathan, and we'll let you go after this because we know you have to write about Justin Fields. In the end, as this worked out, could have been Carolina, could have been Detroit, could have been Denver, could have been New England, right? All these different places. In the end, going 11th, going to the Bears. How would you, in the end, grade this fit for Justin Fields?
I definitely think it's a better fit for him to win soon than if he had gone to some of those teams you're talking about at the top. You know, the Jets, certainly the Jaguars. I mean, these are places that have not really had a winning structure in place. Now the Jaguars are obviously changing things over, but it could be a longer build there than it is going to be, I think, in Chicago. You've got Allen Robinson there. You have some other pieces that are, this is a team that maybe underachieved a little bit, but the big thing that was holding them back was quarterback. And like you say, now it's just a matter of how quickly we think Justin Fields has the intangibles and the skills necessary to compete to succeed long-term in the NFL, having watched him the last 2 years. But does he get there fast? Does he get there in time for this window to really sync up for Chicago? Because like you said, defensively, there's not a lot of complaints right now on that side of the ball.
All right, Nathan, we'll let you go. Good luck with the Justin Fields coverage. If you guys are watching this, make sure you're reading cleveland.com /OSU for all the Ohio State coverage. And of course, you're reading cleveland.com /Browns for all the Cleveland Browns coverage. We might come back to Justin Fields a little bit down the line, but let's go back to what's happening with the Browns. Terry Pluto has joined us. Terry, as we are watching this draft unfold, how does this compare to how you have felt watching other Cleveland Browns drafts unfold over your years covering this franchise? I would imagine it's a little bit more relaxing, is it not?
It really is. I mean, I have looked at, well, first of all, we're always obsessed with quarterbacks. I mean, it's fun to listen to. The Bears are desperate. The Jets are desperate. Everybody else is desperate. And we're sitting here going, okay, I mean, as I wrote the other day, and I think you feel the same way, if not, correct me, but at the very least, you got a pretty good quarterback who could get you the playoffs in Baker. Well, that's your floor. That's a great place to be. So that's been it. And the desperation that would go into this is the franchise changing draft. And how many times they write this? And if they don't, and actually the other opposite would be if they don't get it right, the world's going to end and, it'll be another 20 years of being terrible. So that's been the big thing there. So it's actually kind of fun to watch and see what these other teams are doing and watch them sweat.
By the way, a shout out to our boss, Dave Campbell, who I was talking to him on the phone earlier, and he said this could be one of the best days in Bears history. They could find their quarterback and Aaron Rodgers could end up someplace else. So
it's a great point. It really is.
I mean, if Aaron Rodgers gets
Hey,
traded,
by the way, Doug, I've never asked you this. What do you think of Fields? Because you watched him a lot.
oh no, I like him. I think he's got it on and off the field. I haven't seen a lot of quarterbacks who have the natural physical skills he has in terms of size and speed, who's also as accurate as he is. I was stunned how accurate he was from day one with Ohio State. And often, right, when you talk about accuracy, we talked about accuracy with Baker Mayfield a lot coming out. Well, Baker Mayfield doesn't run a 4.4, and he's not 6'3 like Justin Fields. So I think he is a bit of a rare combination of talent, sort of physical, athletic talent, and accuracy. And he can make every throw. To me, he can make the reads. He can read the defenses. And then if he's in trouble, he can escape and run 40 yards. So I was confused by everything that's happened. I thought he was the second best quarterback in the draft. Not pretending I'm a Zach Wilson expert, but I think it's a great move for the Bears. So,
and also, I mean, if you're Fields, and Dan, what about this? How you're sitting there, they take this guy from North Dakota State, who played what was it, one game this past year or whatever it was. I mean, yeah, that's the kind of guy to me you take in the second or third round. I mean, I could be wrong, but my goodness.
That to me was the Patrick Mahomes effect. I feel like there was maybe not Trey Lance, but Zach Wilson was definitely a little bit of that Patrick Mahomes effect where everybody sat and passed on Patrick Mahomes back in 2017. And then they look at a guy like Zach Wilson who kind of plays similarly. I couldn't tell you much about Trey Lance. I didn't watch much North Dakota State football.
Well, you wouldn't have seen much of him anyway.
Yeah, right. The quarterback position so much is people get caught up in traits and all of that stuff, and that's fair, and it's worked out for certain guys. But like sometimes you can just watch a guy and think, man, he's really good. Like we could say that with Baker. I mean, you go back and watch Baker Mayfield at Oklahoma, and you saw a pretty good quarterback there. Like just watching him play without getting into the measurables and all that stuff. So I feel like with Justin Fields, same thing with Trevor Lawrence, right? We watched Trevor Lawrence for 3 years. That guy is just really good. And Justin Fields, I think you see something there. You see how he played against Clemson twice. You see how he's played another, I think there's something there with that guy. Is he going to be better than Zach Wilson and Trey Lance? I don't know. I couldn't tell you, but he's certainly got a chance because when you watch him play on Saturdays, he looks really good.
I do. Doug, and maybe you could help with this. You ever hear this thing? It was called the Lewin Rule, Lewin. It was one of the real early analytics things. And in fact, this guy later worked for the Cavs and some other teams. Basically, his theory was if he played fewer than 24 games, at that point it was 2 seasons, and your percentage, this is big time football too, was under 58 or 60%. That's back when the percentages were lower. You stunk basically in the pros, and there were a lot of, or you struggled, whether it's Sanchez or Achilles Smith and some others. And I was just trying, and you guys think, has there been anybody recently, say with less than 20 starts, that's done pretty well?
Well, I know Parcells is a big believer in that, right? That you have to have a certain number of starts too. And that came up with Mitch Trubisky a ton.
Yes.
Because Mitch Trubisky only started 1 year at North Carolina.
Yes.
And, we're covering it. He's a Cleveland guy. And it's why would you get hung up on that? I thought that was a little bit unfair. You're not going to believe in the guy just because he didn't happen. You can't control who else is on your college team. And here we are. And now Mitch Trubisky is in that column of see, he didn't start that much in college and it didn't work.
And the theory too, the other thing that would go on is, and see what you guys, Dan or whatever think, is so you take a guy who doesn't play that much, Sanchez, Trubisky or whatever, and you almost end up starting him right away.
Right. And that's the new thing too, right? It's hard to, when you are in these desperate modes, to not start a guy right away. And it's the instinct of everybody. I do think the guy that came into play with Trey Lance is Josh Allen. And that's an obvious comparison, but North Dakota State, Wyoming. I think if Josh Allen hadn't worked, I'm not sure Trey Lance would have gone this high. And I think that's a little bit of a fallacy because I think from an analytical standpoint, a lot of people would tell you, Josh Allen, there was a lot going against him, but he might be the exception to the rule, right? That he was really inaccurate. The level of competition wasn't great, but he figured it out. but it doesn't mean that everybody's going to figure it out. But I also have changed my mind a little bit about this. It doesn't mean that I think the Browns should have taken Josh Allen over Baker Mayfield, but over time, I do understand the idea of, you know what, let's shoot for upside at quarterback. And if we're wrong, bail, give up, and fire again. And keep firing until you get it right. Who cares whether he's what his basement is?
Yeah.
Draft on ceiling until you get it right. And so if that's what you do with Trey Lance, and if you're wrong, you're wrong. But I would rather do that with Trey Lance and Justin Fields than I would with Mac Jones, right?
Yeah.
I mean, maybe Mac Jones's floor is higher, but who cares? I don't know that his ceiling is there. And so that's why I'm not surprised that Mac Jones is a quarterback who's still sitting there.
I just
And
looked it up.
it's not as expensive. Sorry, Terry. It's not as expensive to take those shots now either.
Yeah.
You know, because you're not drafting a guy number one and paying him $50 million anymore. Now, you know, I mentioned this a little earlier, that 5th-year option changing to being guaranteed after year 3 makes it a little dicier because you got to make that decision earlier, and you can't, you know, you used to be able to pick up that option, and then you got a year to cut the guy if you want. Now you don't have that option, but still, even with that, it's cheaper to kind of keep taking those shots if it doesn't work out.
And also, what do you guys think where if he's good enough to pick up the 5th-year option and after 3 years, and even if he struggles in year 4, you probably could trade him somewhere for something.
I mean, Sam Darnold got traded.
Yeah, exactly. That's my point. There you go. By the way, I looked it up. Allen had 27 college starts at Wyoming.
Okay.
And he played in junior college too. So, of course, some of those other guys like Achilles Smith did. But I'm not saying it's everything, but it's just this is a unique to go 3 that high. And I think you guys are on to the Mahomes. I don't want to be the guy that missed on that one. Maybe because I'm wearing a Wyoming hat, I'm partial to Josh Allen right now. I got tired of seeing my bald head on these awful things.
Well, I know, and people have brought up the point, you know, the Niners, the year that the Bears took Trubisky and the Niners traded with the Bears, and they could have taken Deshaun Watson or Patrick Mahomes. They took Solomon Thomas, who's not even on the Niners anymore. So they could have had their quarterback before. So now when they're going to take quarterback, aren't you going to take upside? And then they wind up taking Trey Lance. Micah Parsons, pick number 12. That's a Big Ten guy, Penn State linebacker who opted out this year. He goes 12 to Dallas. I think that's a little high for him. He's a guy that was heavily recruited by Ohio State for a long time. He's from Pennsylvania, wound up at Penn State. We're at 12 picks in. Terry, the Browns are at 26. Dan and I were talking a lot about the cornerbacks. 2 cornerbacks off the board. How interested are you in cornerback for the Browns, or is there somebody in particular that you are really eyeing as the guy that you hope is there when the Browns pick at 26?
Well, I've given up on the linebacker debate, so because they don't like him, and so at least they don't like him in the first round. So, not going to go down there. Ellis Williams really helped me on Newsome, and it got me really to look at him. And you know, he's pretty interesting. I guess the Stoke kids. One of the things that Mike Pettin was right about, boy, I'm not sure when was the last time I've ever said those words together, but one of the things that Mike Pettin was right about is almost like you could never have enough cornerbacks. And he almost related them. I had one-on-one with him once, kind of like pitching. You know, you think you have enough and then you don't. And when you don't, boy, do you get hurt. So that's why I do think that, you know, all this stuff on Greedy Williams, this guy's got to get on the field to show me anything. And by the way, how good was he in those 12 games?
Maybe not as good as Terrence Mitchell.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, I don't know. Like, not.
Did anybody pick? Suppose they're both the old thing, change the name on the back of the jerseys, and they play with no names in their jerseys. There's Mitchell. There's Greedy Williams. Who's better?
No, the idea that like Greedy is locked into a starting spot, even if he's healthy, I think is certainly no guarantee, Terry.
Yeah, I think that would be one of those things where, you know, this front office has done so many things right, and there's been so little to criticize. I think if we went into this season with Greedy Williams kind of written in pen as that starter, I think that would be something that we look at and say, all right, you guys are taking a pretty big risk here. Now, maybe they'd prove right, and it would be just another one of those things that they got right. But I think if you're really believing in yourself as a Super Bowl contender, and I sure think they are, you've got to make sure you're covered at that number 2 corner spot.
All right, so the cornerbacks right now. So who do they have after Denzel and Greedy? Who else?
Well,
Hill?
they have. I mean, Troy Hill can play inside and out, but you want him to play inside.
Yeah.
That's why you signed him.
Okay.
And your fourth corner is who right now? MJ
That's
Stewart?
Are we talking Robert Jackson?
They're probably going to add somebody, right? I mean, there are
Yeah.
some people, there are some veterans still available
Mhm.
floating around out there. It feels like, just the way they added Malcolm Smith late last year, Ronnie Harrison after the Delpit injury late last year. There will be a corner they can add. But Terry, to your point,
Yeah.
they don't have enough yet. They don't have enough. And that's why it feels like that's the position, even if it's not in the first round, it's going to be addressed, I think, at least by day 2. That
Maybe
they
you take
have
a
to do
couple.
something.
You take a couple.
I think
of them.
they'll draft a corner for sure at some point. Here, you guys want me to read you the names?
Yes, please.
These are the corners on the roster. This is just in alphabetical order. Brian Allen, first time I've heard that name. AJ Green, which was the undrafted free agent out of
Once
Oklahoma
upon a
State
time, they
last
gave
year.
him 160,000 to sign as undrafted.
Troy Hill, Robert Jackson, MJ Stewart, Denzel Ward, and Greedy Williams. So there's not really, Robert Jackson and AJ Green, and I'll admit I know absolutely nothing about Brian Allen, but it's basically Robert Jackson and AJ Green are your 3 and 4 corners right now. Because I think MJ Stewart is pretty much primarily an inside guy.
No, I think it's the spot where, again, we saw it last year. It's not quite as gaping as left tackle. It's like we all knew they were taking a left tackle at 10 last year because they didn't have a left tackle, and it just fit perfectly. There was a surplus in the draft where they were picking at 10. They knew they would get a good one. It's not quite to that point at corner at 26 because there's too many things that can happen in front of you. But I think Dan, you're right that if it's not 26, man, it's certainly in round 2, or it's certainly one of the third round picks, or maybe you take one in the second round and one in the third round. That you got to take a couple shots on some guys. And this is where you get back into the trade down area that, Ellis said trade down. I know it's been discussed. If there isn't a guy you love at 26, but there's 5 guys you like in the 40s, well, maybe you move down, get an extra third rounder, get something for next year or whatever, and you add volume if you're not going to get one of your top 4 guys, if Farley and Newsome are both off the board. Terry, would you be okay? Like if Caleb Farley and Greg Newsome are gone, and I think they will be, but they're not yet.
How good is Stokes?
I like Stokes, but I don't know anything. He's big. He runs a sub 4.3. So he's big and he's fast, and he covered SEC receivers at Georgia. I guess the knock on him is he's not great with the ball in the air, that he has good coverage and he doesn't necessarily react to it well. Well, I don't know. If you got a big guy who runs a 4.3, I would think maybe you could help him get better at that in the NFL. And I would maybe be interested in the traits associated with that. Tyson Campbell's the other corner from Georgia. They're both kind of projected in that 30-40 range. I had Stokes at 26 for the Browns, but Terry, I think either of them, and you get into that mix, right? Maybe not one of the top 4, but that second tier of corners could be very, very attractive to them.
And then at that point, you start talking about, do you make that pick at 26 or do you try and make it tomorrow?
Right. And then if you trade down, right, then it's where you start trusting Andrew Berry. Maybe you trade down from 26, but then maybe now if you have 2/3, you have 2/4, you traded your first down, maybe you have an extra one there. Maybe you can move up in the second, right? With what you traded down to come up, and you don't have to wait to 59 to get your guy. Maybe you can come up and get your guy in the late 30s or the 40s. Would you be okay with the trade down, Terry, or are you not in that business?
I'm okay. I mean, I'm not wild about trading out of the top 10 or something like that, but 26 to 34, I don't know, 40. Because really, I don't sit around staring at videos of all these guys or whatever. By the way, to your point though, what's wrong with a bigger cornerback? Sideways. I'm tired of the little.
I like big corner. I think this team needs a big corner.
Yeah.
Denzel can play big, but he's still only 5'10".
And he's going to play 12 games.
Right.
And I think
that's not a knock. It's just what happens.
I haven't done the research on it. I don't know enough if there are lots of teams that have 2 smaller corners, but that would be the situation with Asante Samuel, who seems like a skilled guy from Florida State, but he's small. So now if you take him, now, is that what you want? All things being equal, this seems like it would be an opportunity to lean toward a bigger corner, given what you have already. So I do think that's where maybe a guy like Stokes could come into the picture.
Dan, the great list you just read. So who are actually the outside cornerbacks besides Denzel and Greedy?
AJ Green is probably an outside guy. Robert Jackson is an outside guy. Maybe Brian Allen is, but
but you don't know who he is.
Yeah, you're not relying on that guy. So, and MJ Stewart can probably play outside, right? Like Kevin Johnson could play outside and might have actually. I mean, Kevin Johnson was competing for that number 2 corner spot.
Yeah,
and might have had a leg up on it before he had that injury. But I don't know. I mean, you're looking at Robert Jackson, AJ Green,
and that's
maybe
what
MJ Stewart, or you got to move Troy Hill out. And I don't think you want to move Troy Hill outside. You brought him in to lock down that inside spot.
And guys, when they were talking about getting the defensive tackle after Richardson was let go, well, I think we just highlighted the fact if you are looking at need, all right, your defensive tackles, list them down. You've got the roster there. I mean, obviously you have Billings.
Oh.
And
Hold on,
Billings, Elliott, and Malik Jackson. I mean, I think that's, we talked about that on Gotta Watch the Tape. I think that feels like a trio that you can rotate through those 2 spots, and that might be okay. It's like how often does your 4th defensive tackle get on the field if everybody's healthy? Like not a ton, probably. And plus, if Clowney can play inside a little bit on passing downs, that kind of thing, it gives you a little flexibility.
You can play Miles inside too. I like that idea. I mean, Miles' first career sack came from 3 technique. He can get in there if you want to mix things up. And I think Tack can probably play inside too. So you've got, just so we have the guys on the roster, Malik Jackson, Andrew Billings, Sheldon Day, and Jordan Elliott are your 4 defensive tackles right now. And by the way, the guy we never talk about that I see on this list, he's not a tackle, but Curtis Weaver. That's one of those guys. Is at some point tonight when we start talking about edge guys, I think we maybe need to do a better job of bringing up Curtis Weaver. Because he's the forgotten man, because he was out all last year. They didn't draft him. They claimed him off waivers. We never saw or heard from him, but obviously he's a guy that they like, considering that they grabbed him and stashed him.
I do think, and I don't know about this, but if they like DeSante Samuel, who I think can play inside or out, he's a smaller guy. I don't know if you could draft DeSante Samuel and then have your plan B that Troy Hill is going to compete with Greedy outside. And if Troy Hill beats out Greedy, or if Greedy's not healthy, then Troy Hill's your outside corner and Asante Samuel's your slot corner. I don't know if that could work. Troy Hill played inside for the Rams last year, but Dan, he played outside a lot of his career before that. Clearly, I think we thought of him as a slot corner when he came here, but I don't know if they would view his flexibility as something that could give them a little flexibility in how they draft a corner potentially.
Right. And Terry, you know this. I mean, you can bring a guy in and have the best laid plans for him. This is going to be the inside corner, but the NFL doesn't let you really have plans very often. A guy gets hurt. You mentioned Denzel Ward misses 4 games a year. All those plans can get torpedoed. And one of those things could be, Troy Hill ends up starting on the outside. If he's the best guy out there, I would do it. If you get to training camp and he's your second best outside corner, and you've got to scramble a little bit to figure out what to do on the inside, I wouldn't hesitate to do that. I think that second outside is that important. Plus, you have those safeties. You got 3 safeties that can all play in the slot.
Terry, the idea of, and as we watch this, 3 receivers off the board so far through 13 picks, no defensive linemen off the board yet. We know the edge class is not great. None of them have gone yet. The idea of a receiver in the first round, Terry, whether it's Elijah Moore, whether it's Rashad Bateman, it would have to be somebody that maybe slips a little bit to him. That clearly would be a pick sort of aiming toward a future where you don't have both Odell Beckham and Jarvis Landry on this roster long-term. How interested are you on the idea of a receiver at 26 for the Browns if one falls there?
Not nearly as interested as I am at a cornerback. I just, the more we look at those names, the more I go, oh my goodness. And I do remember Barry, by the way, mentioning a couple of times in different things about Hill having the flexibility to play inside or out, leading to the point that he knows that they're going to have to get some depth there. Whereas when it comes to receivers, yeah, you got the two guys making 30 million combined, but you do have Richard. I know he's my client and all that, but still, you still got him. And you also have, what do you guys think of Peoples-Jones? I'm intrigued by Peoples-Jones.
I mean, if he's your fourth best receiver on the roster right now, he's a heck of a lot better than the fourth best corner on the roster right now. I know that, right, Dan?
Right. And I keep cautioning people with this because this is the reality. Somebody you like is not going to play this year, and that's fine because you have a ton of talent and you should win a bunch of games. But like Donovan Peoples-Jones might not play as much as people want him to play this year, or I don't know, David Njoku or Harrison Bryant might not play as much as people want to see him play, or you might not see that Kareem Hunt, Nick Chubb backfield that we all want to see so much, or at least I want to see a ton of. You might not see that. Right. I mean, you can only have 5 guys out there besides your offensive line and your quarterback. So, it's a good problem to have, but I do think Browns fans need to understand, like, especially if they draft a wide receiver at 26, somebody's going to be the odd man out. And, we're going to be getting questions. Our subtexters are going to question, Terry, you're going to get, hey, Terry's, hey, why isn't this guy playing more? Why isn't this guy getting the ball more? Well, I mean, that's just how it is. And as long as the coaching staff can manage it, it's fine because somebody's going to get hurt. They're going to need somebody to step up at some point.
Well, you said it. You said the magic.
It's a good thing to have too much talent.
You said the magic words. It was something when I'm going to be the old guy card. 1979, I'm a rookie writer covering the Baltimore Orioles. And we're going on about something about pitching, this and that. And Earl Weaver looks at me and says, kid, remember this. Somebody always gets hurt. And often it's not who you think will get hurt. And by the way, there were a few adjectives in there that, Weaver would sprinkle when he was trying to get ejected. But then he would laugh and cackle. But it always stuck with me. I mean, listen, that's 150 years ago or pretty close. And, just like last year, Odell did get hurt. And if you go back and look at, some of the other guys, they didn't have as much, but all of a sudden the whole secondary seemed to get hurt. So it's always something, happening. And that's why when you say are there different receivers and Odell is still coming off an ACL and he still is a guy that's missed 42% of the games over the last 3 years. I say that over and over again because he gets hurt.
I want to make sure I ask you about this, Terry, before you leave us. Andrew Berry, I think a lot of people believe in Andrew Berry in this front office. I think a lot of that is based on, even though, they hired Stefanski before they hired Andrew Berry, so he didn't really hire Kevin Stefanski, but I think there's general faith with what's happening because of the Berry and Stefanski hires. He clearly has been targeted and smart in the free agency with what he did on the offensive side of the ball last offseason and on the defensive ball this offseason. But we only have one draft. And I'm not trying to be negative, but I just want to spin it an opposite way than how we usually talk about it. Taking Jedrick Wills at 10, I think Tristan Wirfs probably had a better rookie year at tackle than Wills did. I think Mekhi Becton probably had a better rookie year at tackle than Wills did. Wills was good, but you could argue there were 2 tackles taken after him who maybe were a little bit better. Grant Telpett, terrible injury. No blame on that. Jacob Phillips, we don't know. 3rd rounder. We don't know exactly. Jordan Elliott, 3rd rounder. We don't know exactly. Nick Harris, will he contribute in interior line? We don't know exactly. Terry, do we know what kind of drafter Andrew Berry is? Like, do we automatically have faith in Andrew Berry for this draft? Or are we not exactly sure yet? And we have to see what happens over the next 3 days.
To be fair to Berry, the 1st round pick, I would argue, Wirfs played right tackle, and that helps, as opposed to left. And this kid went from right to left and didn't get annihilated. And the first left tackle taken in that draft was a Brown, the guy that the Giants took. He's awful.
Awful.
So you could make some huge mistakes there. So, and Becton, I know there's a lot of there's some injury and kind of work ethic concerns with him, despite the fact he's really gifted. So I would, looking at that, if I had to redraft, I'm still taking Wills. And that was the main thing. He had to get that right. He had to get the left right, and he had to be able to go from right to left, and he did. That worked out. So that was his biggest job. But to your point, then it gets interesting. Delpit, we know nothing about him. He's coming off an Achilles. And then what did Phelps get? Was it a knee he kept having? What was his problem?
He had a knee at one point. There were a couple things here and there. But yeah, the knee injury was
fire. That's what I remember.
What's that?
He plays with his hair on fire.
Right. And there's clips out there of him. You see him running around making plays.
I had hair on fire a long time ago, and look what happened. I got to Harrison had his hair on fire. Phillips had his hair on fire. There's a lot of hair on fire. But we need these guys with their hair on fire. And even Harrison, he missed 5 games. We need these guys on the field to see. But to Doug's point, Delpit, we know nothing. Phillips, we know almost nothing. Elliott, we'll see. Harris, I will give him that game where he went in and played guard. That he did a nice job that day within his position. I think the next time he had some trouble at guard. And then
he was bad in his second game.
Yeah. I do like Bryant. I think that he's a guy that could take a big step up with this offense. And I like Peoples-Jones, but are any of those besides Wills a lock to be a starter based on what we saw last year? It would. Start Delpit, but we don't know.
I do think it's important. I mean, Andrew, we always joke that he doesn't tell us anything in his pressers, but there are things he tells us. And I think the way he views the draft is I'm not bringing guys in to start immediately. Now, Jedrick Wills was different. Grant Delpit was different. But for the most part, I think he views the draft as we're thinking long game. So if Jacob Phillips and Jordan Elliott come in and they aren't superstars day one, that's okay. We need them to develop and grow and eventually become starting caliber players in year 3 or year 4. I think there's very few instances where he views the draft as I'm going to go grab a guy that I need to have on the field right now. Again, last year was different just because left tackle was so desperate and they couldn't fix everything in free agency. But I think we're seeing a little more now, like, okay, maybe we don't know what Jacob Phillips is, but there's no way we can judge it yet. I think when we're doing this a year from now, we'll probably be able to have a little bit better of a verdict on whether Phillips is a good pick or not. Same with Elliott, all these other guys.
For what it's worth, Joe Banner told me, because he was one of the early analytics guys, that only 20% of third round picks become starters for more than 2 years or something like that. It was a 20% figure. A lot
Mac Jones to the Patriots, by the way.
Could it be more they just sit there. They just sit and he falls right in their lap. They didn't have to move. Anything, huh? They just sat there. And I think it's the right spot for Mac Jones. I think it's where we had him in our mock draft. I think it's the right fit. Now he'll probably be good, but I don't think anybody else ahead of the Patriots should have taken him. I think this is exactly where Mac Jones should have gone, 15 to New England. Sorry, Terry, go ahead about Joe Banner and the third round picks.
So when we talk about Jacob Phillips, we talk about Elliott or whoever else, it's that 20% figure is the one that they use. We often remember the guys that end up starting from the lower there, but there's a whole bunch of names that don't. So, what do you guys think of Jones?
Of Mac Jones?
Yes.
So they ran an RPO heavy offense. He was surrounded by unbelievable talent. He had a brilliant play caller in Steve Sarkisian, and he was set up to succeed. So, but just because you're set up to succeed doesn't mean you're guaranteed to succeed. So I think I don't think he can carry a franchise, but I think in the right situation with the right coach, I think he's a quick decision maker with that RPO offense at Alabama. You got to get it out of your hands and read the defense and bang, and it's out. I think he can be that guy in the right situation. I think he probably fell into the right situation, but I think to try to put him in San Francisco, the upside you're looking for at 3, I wouldn't have done it, but this feels right. And I think it's quite possible that the Patriots just got their quarterback for the next 15 years. And we may all look back and be like, oh my God, I can't believe the league let Mac Jones fall to the Patriots. This was the right thing. He's not, his natural talent isn't good enough for him to go any higher than this. but he can probably go run Josh McDaniels' offense and look pretty good.
Yeah, he's going to a great offensive coordinator. He's got some targets now in New England. This isn't quite the Patriots of a year ago. He's got two really good tight ends. They're kind of going back to, they were that team that ran that big, heavy tight end offense way back in, what was it, when they had Gronk and Hernandez. I mean, they were doing it before everybody else started doing it again. So they're kind of going back to that. And, I would trust him in Josh McDaniels' offense. But I'm with you, Doug. This isn't a guy you can take at number 3. You've got to take bigger upside, bigger swing at number 3. This
Who
is
was
a
the
good
guy
fit
that
number
you
3.
wanted
We'll
to trade
see.
for? Wasn't he from Alabama? I'm having an old man's brain fart.
AJ McCarron.
AJ McCarron.
Yeah, this is, I guess he's,
I'm sorry, but
I think Mac Jones is like turbocharged AJ McCarron, but it's like it's in the realm, right? And this is not a shot at the Patriots. He will have less offensive talent around him with the Patriots than he did at Alabama.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Because he had 2 first-round receivers, and Najee Harris hasn't been picked yet, but he's going to get picked. He had 3 first-round skill guys around him. I don't see Jalen Waller or Devontae Smith on the Patriots right now. And I know they signed all this stuff in free agency, but it is something you have to keep in mind. But that's an argument you could use against Justin Fields too, because Ohio State, they have 2 receivers who are going to go in the first round next year that Justin Fields was throwing to. Mac Jones actually reminds me a little bit of Dwayne Haskins, the Ohio State quarterback who went 15 a couple drafts ago and busted out because he's a get rid of the ball, get it out of your hands, be a point guard. And it was a mess in Washington and it didn't work. He needs the right system. Mac Jones needs the right system. He might have it in New England. Terry, before we let you go, who's your pick? Who do you think the Browns will take?
It's boring, but I'm going to go. I want a cornerback, so I would say, all right, I got Newsome 1, Stokes 2, kind of guys that might be there, and Samuels 3. How's that for order?
And it's Dan, as we talked about, it's like, okay, they had those 2 corners go early and it's before the top 10, but now we're at pick 16 and we're still only at 2 corners. So we chilled out a little bit on corners. So that's good. Now this is a spot again, Scott Patsko, I think you picked for the Arizona Cardinals in our mock draft, and you picked a corner for the Arizona Cardinals. Did you not pick Caleb Farley here? And I think you even wanted Greg Newsome here.
I think I had the pick actually.
Yeah, I don't think I had the Cardinals.
Oh, sorry, Dan. Did you? Pick
I wanted Newsome, and I ended up taking. I actually have the screenshot here. I took Farley.
Okay, so Dan, you think corner? We're at pick 16. You think it could be a corner to the Cardinals right here?
I think this is a very key spot for the Cleveland Browns if they want to get a cornerback. So the Cardinals are on the clock, and again, as we're watching this, and you can see Ellis is here, Scott is here, Doug is here. I'm crashing the got to watch the tape party here on
It's
NFL
actually,
draft night.
It's Zaven Collins to the Cardinals.
Oh,
okay.
The train has stopped at Arizona.
Well, this is good for the Browns though, because this was a team that could have taken a corner. And so we had that little mini run there on corners, and then it slowed down a little bit. And, unfortunately, we don't get to do a linebacker for the Browns at 26. Well, I don't know. There might still be a couple guys there. I just want to see Twitter's reaction if the Browns actually shocked the world and took a linebacker at 26. Let me kind of recap where we're at here, because while we were talking with Terry there, we had some picks come through. And we're not going pick by pick here, because if you're watching this live, we're on a little bit of a delay, but just going back to J.C. Horn to Carolina, Patrick Surtain II to the Broncos, Devontae Smith to the Eagles, Justin Fields to the Bears, Micah Parsons to the Cowboys, Rashawn Slater to the Chargers. The Jets get Elijah Vera Tucker, Mac Jones to the Patriots, and then we just had Zaven Collins go to the Arizona Cardinals. So we're up to the Raiders. Ellis, as you're looking at these guys coming up, if we are targeting a corner here at 26, who are the threats?
You guys, I did not plan on coming on this podcast and talking about the Minnesota Vikings right away. But man, the Vikings trading back and sitting there at 23 worries me a bit. I've talked about the Vikings history of taking a corner in the first round. They need one this year with what's going on off the field with them, and that trading back, Mary Kay had them picking Greg Newsome in our mock, and I was honest about that. I was like, look, that might be a little early, but I get why that fits, and that might be exactly what they're doing now. Tennessee needs corners. Pittsburgh. I mean, the Browns are sitting in the best spot they can be right now, but like that run in the top 10, all it takes is a back-to-back, and we're right where we kind of thought we'd be.
I drank too many iced teas, so I'm going to be back in a minute.
Okay, so Scott and Ellis, since you both are jumping on here right now, Scott, has there been a surprise? Has there been anything that's kind of stopped you in your tracks and said, wow, I can't believe that happened? Or what's kind of, if there's not a surprise, what's been kind of your favorite moment of the draft?
I think just watching like the first 10 or 11 picks, you had 4 quarterbacks, 3 or 4 pass catchers, and 2 corners. So it's a passing league, and those first 11 picks there just kind of doubled down on that, and it just kind of, I mean, it matches up in need and the way the draft went this year. But just seeing all those people that are tied to the passing game and knowing how last season kind of reset a bar in a lot of ways in scoring and passing offense, and teams want to either take advantage of that or try to figure out how to defend it. And that kind of stood out to me over the first half of the first round here.
What about you, Ellis?
Yeah, this is actually a perfect time to say it because Doug's not here, because he'll I know he thinks what Cincinnati did was the right move, and which is why I guess I shouldn't say it's a surprise, because a lot of people, many had Jamar Chase mocked to the Bengals there, but you're rolling the dice with landing a tackle later, and doing so means you're landing one that is not as week 1 ready as Penei Sewell and as sure as Penei Sewell. So I just wonder, like, if the Browns were in this spot that the Bengals were in a year ago, would they have done something like this? And it just, the answer is quite obvious, which then brings me to Bengals culture problems, Zach Taylor hot seat stuff that we don't need to get to. But until we see what happens in the second round, you can't penalize the Bengals for that pick yet, but I think it's risky.
This is one of those moments that I just kind of wish we could have gotten a yes or no answer on, because Mary Kay just tweeted linebacker Zaven Collins, a player the Browns spent extra time on and liked. Again, I just wish we could have gotten to that point where we could have gotten a straight up or down vote on if the Browns would have actually pulled the trigger on that. Because I know Andrew Berry's not going to tell us if we ask him here after they make that pick. Doug, I mean, I know you've been on here, but I've just asked Scott and Ellis, just taking that 10,000 foot view of the draft so far, biggest surprise in your mind?
That there's no surprises. I mean, I think it is right on schedule. I don't think there's anything that shocked me, and I think the Browns are going to have some options, right? Bateman's still around. No one's reached for him yet. There are still 2 corners of interest. JOK, I think the spot to watch JOK is 19 to Washington. You can find a gazillion mock drafts that have him to Washington at 19. If he doesn't go to Washington at 19, I know Peter King had the Browns trading up to get him, I think, to 21. I think maybe, and here's the thing why I think there's a linebacker discussion in a vacuum. Hey, do the Browns think a linebacker is worth it in the first round? And then there's a player discussion. And I think Zaven Collins is a freak, right? He's gigantic. He runs like a deer. He can edge rush in addition to playing linebacker. So do the Browns want to take a linebacker in the first round? No. Would they take Zaven Collins? Yeah, I think maybe they would have. JOK is like a linebacker who's safety sized, who can do safety things, right? So would they take a linebacker? I don't think round, right? No offense to Nick Bolton, who's probably a fine player, but I think he's just a linebacker. I think Zaven Collins okay linebackers. So I think that opens things up. Just like we talk about hedges, like with John Johnson can do different things and Troy Hill can do different things. I think they're looking for guys who can do more than one thing. So that's why I think they would have been open to some guys like that. And that's why I think they'll be open to JOK, even though he's classified as a linebacker, if he happens to fall to them.
Yeah, we don't really know what the Browns think about linebackers. That kept coming up, and Andrew Berry was asked about that. Do you really want linebackers? Do you value them? But you're right, Doug, that they need to find somebody that can do more than that one thing. If you look at the snaps, the Browns had 4 linebackers who all had between 900 and 350 snaps last year. And then you had another guy in Jacob Phillips, the rookie, who got almost 200 snaps. Good luck finding another team like that. I went through a bunch of them today, and you'll find teams with 3 guys over 350, but the top 2 are like, both up near 1,000. And then the 4th guy has 40 snaps. So that's a lot of linebackers for the Browns getting a lot of snaps. And it comes down to the fact that they don't have anybody who can do multiple things really well. So you had a lot of guys in situational snaps. And if you can find somebody that can stay on the field and actually be worthy of that, I guess maybe more than BJ Goodson was, then that's a good pick. And that person doesn't need to come in and be a starter this year, but that's something that this team really needs on its defense for sure.
Well, Alex Leatherwood is the pick for the Raiders. So there's a tackle. That's something the Browns have no interest in. So that helps. I don't know if it helps the Raiders. It certainly helps the Browns.
This is the first pivot point where this is good news for the Browns, because this is a guy that very few people were mocking in the top 25 ahead of the Browns at a position the Browns have no interest. Darisaw is still on the board as a tackle. He'll probably still go ahead of the Browns. Jenkins still is a tackle that might go ahead of the Browns. You're adding offensive linemen in a position they don't want, which means that's another team that won't take a corner or won't take JOK. And this is the Raiders thinking they're smarter than everybody. They took Damon Arnett from Ohio State last year, who I watched every snap of his career, and never once in my life did I think he was a first-round pick. But Mike Mayock and John Gruden think they're smarter than everybody. They took that Clemson defensive lineman in the top 5 the other year. They always have their own board. So good luck. Good luck on the slot machines with your board that doesn't look like anybody else's board. In a couple years, you could be making up your own boards. Mayock and Gruden can start their own website together. I'm sure it'll be very popular, because if they keep making picks like this, they're not going to have jobs for very long.
That would be a juggernaut. You'd have the Mike Mayock mock drafts and all that year round. You'd have John Gruden's quarterback school. They would make a killing on that. That's the future right there, Doug. You've hit on it. I don't know what we would call it, but yeah. Well, no, I don't think you could call it. Yeah, I'm not going to say any names that pop into my head here. I don't want to come up with some.
I see Ellis Williams' eyes opening up there.
site.
Ellis Williams is already wondering how he can apply to work at that website. Don't use cleveland.com just to get to grudenmayock.com, Ellis. We see how you operate.
I'm all for Gruden content. The Raiders signed him for 10 years, $100 million. I think DraftKings would be smart to double that. Gruden and betting content. Holy smoke. Sign me up. Doug, to your point about the Raiders too, check out their free agent history as well. That was circling on Twitter, how, their 2019 or 2018 signings, 2019 signings, I think, become their 2021 releases. It's becoming a habit. And the pick is a point where it's good news for the Browns. It makes me wonder what will happen with the rest of those tackles. But again, that does not concern the Browns. I want to make a point on JOK and the linebacker safety conversation. Just some size and weight stuff I think we all need to keep in mind. JOK 6'2", 220, Ronnie Harrison 6'3", 215. And play weight, what they weigh in at these pro days, they tend to fluctuate, but the point is I see JOK as much more of a safety, and adding a safety I'm not sure can cover a deep half or a deep third, mind you, much more by the line of scrimmage type of safety. And the Browns already have 3 of those guys. I just don't know if he makes the most sense there compared to a completely different linebacker style and body type in Zaven Collins, who of course is off the board. But Dan, I completely agree. It's one of those sliding doors where it's like, we'll never know if the Browns would have pulled the trigger on Zaven, but it really makes you wonder.
Well, I think Doug makes a good point. Like, are we talking about a linebacker or are we talking about a player? Right. And I think that's where you have to kind of separate and draw the line, because like you said, Zaven Collins is a freak. And maybe that would be too much for this team to pass up on. Edge rusher off the board. The Dolphins go Jalen Phillips. So that's that's kind of what we've been waiting on is to see where these edge rushers would start to pan out to, because that's something that impacts the Browns as we go towards 26. It does feel like right now Andrew Berry is sort of letting this draft fall to him, which doesn't surprise me. But I do wonder if at some point he might get aggressive if there's somebody. We're going to find out soon if there's somebody he really wants. If he wants to use some of those extra thirds to maybe move up and get a guy. We're starting to get into that range, right? You're probably only going to move up as high as 20, 21, something like that, if you're going to move up at all. So we're starting to get into the range where you've got to keep an eye on if the Browns go after somebody. You know, we talk a ton about edge rusher, but Doug, when Terry was on, I mentioned it. It does. I don't know if the Browns are set at edge rusher, but it sure feels like when you start listing off the names, you got Myles Garrett on the one side that, I mean, that's Myles Garrett, right? Sign Jadeveon Clowney, sign Tag McKinley, have Curtis Weaver over there. We don't know who Curtis Weaver is going to be for this team, but like I mentioned, a guy they obviously like. I hate to throw on names like Porter Gust and all that stuff, but he is a guy that played a lot last year, was around. Joe Jackson, still on the roster, was around. How big of a need is edge rusher actually for this team, do you guys think?
I don't think it's a need. I am very interested. It feels like there are a couple linebackers who could be, I don't know if I want them in the first, but maybe in the second round, who are these linebackers who can also do edge rusher things on occasion. That I'm a little more interested in, but I do think they have some options there. I don't know that Clowney is a long-term thing here. I think he might be 1 year and done, but I think Tack McKinley almost to me is almost like a draft pick that he's still fairly young. You don't really exactly know what you're getting, but you still might get something out of that. I just don't think, I think they're fine this year. And I think they have time to address that. And I have no interest in any of the edge guys. So unless it's Ojulari, unless he falls to them, but I have very little interest in this, but I don't think I think they addressed it. I did in my how they win the draft. I had Baron Browning from Ohio State to them in the second round. He's a linebacker who can do some edge things. So he'll play linebacker. And then if you want to run a package and move Clowney inside or whatever, maybe he can help you on the edge. That maybe I'm interested in. I'm not interested in Jason Oweh or Greg Rousseau in the first round, though.
There's that Jason Oweh name. Scott Nellis, what do you think?
I mean, edge rusher is one of the three positions that this front office has not drafted so that they have, a young player to develop, corner, running back, edge rusher. Those are the three. And I wouldn't be surprised if we see someone picked at all three of those positions in this draft, but I'm with Doug. I don't think edge rusher is something they necessarily need to address early in this draft. I mean, I had an edge rusher going in the third round of my my Browns mock post, and it's basically a guy I picked because he was good against the run and the pass, and he was kind of versatile. Cameron Sample. So not someone you're looking to step in and take snaps away from anybody that they already have. More of a developmental situation, but somebody who's versatile that can do different things. And we know that versatility seems to be the name of the game for this defense going into 2021. So I would be shocked if they take an edge rusher in the first round, but I wouldn't be shocked if they take one later.
Yeah, and I know that Peyton Turner guy, Dan, that's your guy, is someone that has popped up. I saw something today, people talking about could he sneak into the first round, and I didn't know if that was an alert for the Browns because that's a guy you liked in the second, right?
Yeah, I mean he's big. He's got, I think his wingspan is pretty good. He can play inside and outside. A little developmental, I think, but can probably help you right away. Yeah, that's a guy that I kind of circled early on as if you could get this guy, if you went corner in the first, you can get this guy in the second. I'd be about that.
By no means does it make or break, but I do think it's important for first round picks, especially rookies, to play a decent amount their first year. And not saying that if the Browns take one of these edge rushers, they won't earn playing time, but it's a competitive situation, yes, if they draft a first rounder, he will get chances ahead of probably Tack McKinley, but just the what ifs. What if Tack is just better than the rookie and it happens pretty quickly? Then Malik Jackson can play outside. It's just, it becomes a deep room, and early in training camp, you're going to find out how the veterans feel about the young guys. And if they don't have it right away, then they're going to get buried in the depth chart. Where I'm going with this is there's two just as important positions of need on this roster, corner and receiver, that have quicker avenues to the field. And whether that's and people say, well, how is a rookie going to get on the field with Odell and Jarvis? Well, a first round receiver is going to immediately be the number 3 receiver. And this team could very well start playing more 3 wides or just, rotate those 3 in and really put, Carroll Hodge, Rashad Higgins, Donovan Peoples-Jones down the depth chart. And we already know the availabilities at corner. So I think those 2 spots going in the first round have an easier path to a rookie getting meaningful reps in year 1 than adding to an already and a quickly now deep defensive line, specifically at the edge.
Another popular guy mocked to the Browns, Jamin Davis. He's going to Washington.
Oh, okay.
Also, not a corner.
This is good. There are 6 picks before the Browns. Are we in agreement on this? I'm going to list guys that we think would be very good picks for the Browns at 26. Would Greg Newsome fall in that category? Is that a unanimous, very good pick? That's one. There's only 6 picks ahead of him. Is Caleb Farley in that category, or do people have any health reservations about him, or do we feel very good about that?
I think so, but Ellis is kind of.
I
would take Caleb Farley. I don't know about you guys.
We just don't know enough, and the reason that we say they need corner right now is because of a guy who's got injury question marks. So that's my pushback.
I mean, if the Browns pick him, then they clearly don't have those reservations.
And they better be right.
I myself have not medically examined him, so
yeah,
I will take their word for it. I'm pretty sure they probably have.
Well, that's the problem. That's the problem with this draft, right? We just don't have good medicals on a lot of guys.
Yep.
But if that's 2, Rashad Bateman, the Minnesota receiver, if he falls to 26, would everybody feel really good? That's 3. JOK did not go to Washington. And Ellis, while I agree with everything you said, as we think about pillars for this team, and then as we think about good players who are expendable, I don't know what Ronnie Harrison is like super long-term here. If you told me that Joe Woods wants 3 safeties to rely on, and long-term, those safeties are John Johnson, Grant Delpit, and JOK, that might make sense to me. Yeah. And I still could see that. At least for me, there are 6 picks left before the Browns go. Those are 4 guys that I think would be very good picks for the Browns at 26. And so everything we talked about with a cornerback run, we had 2 go early, still 19 picks in, only 2 cornerbacks off the board. I think that's good news for the Browns.
Yeah, this has not gone at all like our mock draft went. I think every cornerback went pretty early, and then we got to the Browns, and we're like, what are we gonna do here? This is certainly a better scenario for the Browns.
Yeah, we had a pretty good run on corners in our mock draft. I've got it up here. There wasn't a lot for the Browns to choose from the cornerback position. We had Zaven Collins going to the Browns in our mock, so obviously we're a little bit off here. Well, and the other thing too is we got to look at the teams in front of them too, right? So I'm waiting for my draft order to load here so I can get it. The Giants were waiting on their pick, and like I said, there's a little delay here on the stream, so we don't worry about that. The Colts, the Titans, the Vikings, the Steelers, and the Jags. Do any of us think the Steelers are going corner?
The Steelers are taking the guy that we all feared is going to fall to them because the Dolphins did not take him at 18. I think the Steelers are taking Najee Harris at 24.
Okay. So who in this group, the Titans could go corner.
Minnesota could go corner.
Minnesota could go corner. You mentioned that. I feel like Jacksonville, I would take a weapon if I was Jacksonville. I would take an offensive weapon. I took my quarterback number 1. I don't want to take, if Rashad Bateman's there and I'm Jacksonville, I'm taking him. So I don't know that they would take a corner.
I'm curious if Bateman goes here to the Giants because the Giants traded out. This is the spot where they traded out, where the Bears jumped up to 11 because the Eagles jumped over the Giants and took Devontae Smith. I think a lot of people have the Giants taking a weapon for Daniel Jones. Maybe it's Bateman or Elijah Moore here.
Well, in our mock that we did that went up on Thursday, we did go receiver for the Giants. That was obviously at number 11. We went Jalen Waddle. So I think that was Tim maybe that made that pick. So he was at least thinking receiver here for the Giants as this went along. Dave Gettleman shocking the world and trading down to collect picks. So, yeah, I'm looking at Daniel Jeremiah's best available players list up on the screen now, and I'm seeing corners up there. I'm seeing guys that I think would get Browns fans excited. What if Kwity Paye falls to the Browns?
Man,
I don't want
jeez.
him.
You don't want him?
No.
Is that an Oweh situation for you, Doug? Like you watched him play and you just didn't like him, or is there another reason?
I just don't think there's enough there for what the Browns already have. I would rather take Eric Stokes or Tyson Campbell, or I'd rather take an athletic corner with maybe a little bit of a risk. Than I just think there's a ceiling on Kwity Paye that to me is not worth going there. And when you already have Myles, again, it's the discussion we keep having. It's like they have Myles Garrett,
right?
And I know, I get it. Jadavion Clowney. Most teams don't have 2 all-pro edge rushers. I get it. It's a great luxury, but I would rather, if it's Kwity Paye, I'd rather take a corner or do the Ellis method and trade down. I just wouldn't do it.
The Browns don't need edge rush help. They need pass rush help. And they've done things this offseason outside of adding Clowney and McKinley to help with that. Strengthening the back of your defense is a big part of that. So it's not necessarily that, they have to take an edge rusher to somehow fix this defense. They've already started down that road of fixing things.
I'm showing everybody Tim Bielik's best available players updated list. He's got Caleb Farley on the top. There's Kwity Paye, Rashad Bateman. If the Browns were picking right now, who is it?
I think it's Newsome.
Over Farley?
I never, just because I think Newsome has everything you want without the questions. So if maybe Farley has a little more upside, but I wouldn't want the questions. I'd want the more sure thing.
And just for the folks who listen to this as the podcast tomorrow, we're at pick 20 right now as we're answering this question.
Yeah, I agree. I think Newsome's the safest thing on the board, and I think corner is becoming as we just keep working through this, as we have been all week, it's becoming just more and more obvious to need corner. I'm starting to really pull back from the edge rusher stuff as we talk through this live, and I'm going to remain intrigued with a receiver, but I don't think Bateman makes it that far.
Yeah, I agree. Corner, whoever it is, it just potentially accomplishes multiple things, because I know you talked earlier on the pod here or on the show about the depth or the lack of depth behind, Ward and Hill and potentially Greedy Williams. Well, you're adding a good talent that can step in and be that depth. And if things don't work out with Greedy Williams, then, you banked against that. So you can help yourself out in multiple ways, and you're helping in coverage, which is important.
Rashad Bateman fans are very happy right now. Kadarius Toney is the pick for the Giants here at 20. Tim had him at 30. He was in the 30s on this board. I just saw Dave Campbell is back in our control room deleting names off this list as they get picked. I just saw him down here in the 30s get deleted.
This is just going to be where stuff gets dicey. I mean, this is just going to be where boards start. We saw it probably maybe a little bit with the Leatherwood thing, which, if you go back a year ago, there were talks he'd be the number 1 tackle, and then he didn't come out. This is where it starts getting dicey, where boards are just going to start, it's in the eye of the beholder.
This is one of those, I heard Peter Schrager from the NFL Network talking about Toney as a wild card in this draft, that he is a super upside, bit of a risky pick. But again, this is as much as we talked about, and I'd be curious to see what Ellis and Scott have to say about this, because we talked about this before. When the Browns are in the situation they're in, which is a team that's trying to win the Super Bowl, that we all know what we're talking about at corner, but they're not gaping needs, right? They can just take good players and think about the future. Does that mean that they should be riskier? Take an injury risk on a guy like Farley, because if for some reason it doesn't work out, it's not the end of the franchise. But if you get a top 15 talent at 26 because of injury stuff, should you roll the dice, or do you try to be a little more certain in your thing? Because you're like, listen, we're right on the precipice. We just need a little push. We need somebody at 26 that gives us just a little push. We don't want to get nothing out of them, right? How should the Browns be approaching it with where this franchise is?
Well, there is no certain pick, number one. But number two, I think they can be a little, maybe, if you want to call it a risk, I guess they can do that. And let's remember that this is not the final opportunity for the Browns to address cornerback. There are actually still free agents out there who they could sign. Richard Sherman's still out there, Steve Nelson. So this isn't their last chance to figure out how they're going to, deal with 2021 if Greedy Williams isn't ready to go or just isn't the answer. So from that respect, then yeah, you can pick the player you think has the best opportunity going forward to help you out. And if that looks like a risk to people, then fine, because this roster is in really good shape.
Well, they've got three. They've got 3 more picks too in the top 91. So if they don't go corner here, are you getting as good a guy? But Doug, you've mentioned Tyson Campbell a number of times, and he's a guy way back when I would do like an early mock draft sim, he'd come up. And I'm like, oh, okay, that guy's really interesting. So yeah, I mean, if you add a guy like that in the second round, that's one way to address corner too. So I feel like in the course of free agency, we all kind of forgot that there's still a draft. And now here we are on the first night of the draft. And of course, we're talking about 26. It's the most important pick the Browns have right now. But they're also going to make 3 picks as of right now, 3 picks on Friday.
Yeah, I think, Doug, I really like your question about risking it or, trying to play a little more safe. I think corner is the only position on this roster they can't afford to risk it unless they're 100% certain of Farley's injury history and the likelihood that really the certainty that it's not going to be a factor down the road. If something new happens, then all right, that's how this game works. But if it is a chance of reoccurring in any way, shape, or form, the multiple injuries he's had, knee, back, etc., then I think you got to stay away just because of what's going on in that room right now. But to address your upside point, I do think you go for it aside from corner because of where this team's at, meaning, and you can probably see where my head's been all day. I keep talking about receivers. I think Rashard Bateman or Elijah Moore are both better than Kadarius Toney and will contribute more on day one. I'm not here to talk like who's going to be better in 5 years. Bateman or Moore make an NFL offense better in September of the 2021 season immediately compared to what Toney's going to do. That's the type of upside pick I'd be interested in for a team like the Browns picking in this range and how complete their roster is.
Can I say I'm curious about this from a receiver standpoint? Let's say Bateman and Moore both get to them. And correct me if I'm wrong. Moore is more of a slot guy. Bateman's more of an outside guy. Is that a fair thing?
If they're on the same team and you had to play one somewhere, you would put Moore in the slot. Yeah.
So I don't know if people want to have this conversation right now. We just don't think that Odell and Jarvis are both here long-term at the prices that they are with the way this offense runs. But when I think about it, I just think about Jarvis staying because of who he is to the team, which makes me more interested in an outside receiver than a slot receiver. So that makes me more interested in Bateman than in Moore, because I think you're picking an Odell replacement more than you're picking a Jarvis replacement. Now, that is very specific. That is very long-term. I understand that. You take the best players, but is that crazy for me to have that in my head if they have a receiver choice in the first round or second round and they're looking for a style?
No, I think it's fair, and I really respect the logic, and I'll go storyline or extend that out further for you. Like, it feels kind of obvious that Odell is ripe for his next chapter. One more act in his career, where Jarvis, you could see maybe not having the hottest market for a third contract, him working out something in Cleveland, and this this ends up being his spot, his stop, his final destination, if you will. Maybe he gets one more 1-year deal somewhere else, like every player tries to do. But I can see the diverging paths of Odell and Jarvis as they've been tied together, their whole career. I think you're onto something there, which would then, yes, prioritize a guy who, of course, can do both, but one you can solidify outside in the anticipation that Odell's gone before Jarvis.
I think sometimes we get maybe a little too narrow focused on this offense and how can the Browns have 2 receivers taking up $30 million. But if that's the one position where I would be okay with having 2 players take up that kind of money. I mean, the Browns are still going to pass. They still passed more than they ran. They were one of the teams that closed the gap, obviously. But again, this team is still going to feed off the passing game, and the fact that you have Baker Mayfield heading toward a contract extension, the passing is still the most efficient way to move it. This is a passing league, and I don't know. The further we get away from last season, and the closer we get to maybe seeing Beckham and Landry on the field together again this year, I don't see the damage in keeping both of them, and bringing Landry back, bringing Odell back. It's a good situation. It's similar to the running back situation. You have a good setup here, and I don't know. Maybe everything will fall apart this year, and Beckham will turn out. We'll finally figure out, he's just not the right fit here. He needs to move on. But again, I think it's a really good setup with a lot of potential, and I'm becoming more okay with paying a lot of money to those two guys.
Yeah, I had the number in a story I wrote a month ago. I want to say Jarvis is like the 16th highest paid receiver in the league, or somewhere in that ballpark. And that's the issue. He just isn't the 16th best receiver in football. So like, Scott, I get your point about like paying the room that, but from an individual player standpoint, Jarvis isn't that, despite of the production he still does produce and what he does mean to the Browns. He's not in that top 20 anymore, where you bring in a rookie, you would hope he enters that conversation pretty quickly if you're spending a first on him.
Well, and this is where you should be paying guys. I mean, this is where you should look at your roster and say, man, this wide receiver thing is all out of whack, because it's not going to be for that much longer. And you're going to switch how you're building this roster around Baker and around Miles and around Denzel. And you can't do it. Ellis, you call them luxury items. I mean, this is when you should be just all in. Like, yeah, it's crazy to pay two wide receivers this much money, especially when one of them is Jarvis Landry, who I think is absolutely fantastic, but he's not a $15 million a year guy. But he helps you win, and you can afford him. So I think this is the time to be a little reckless with your spending.
The draft is going well. The draft is going
It has
well
Quiddy payoff
for the Browns. It's going well for the Browns. 4 picks, 22, 23, 24, 25. 4 picks left before the Browns go. Farley, Newsome, Bateman, JOK, all still there. Unless they're the next 4 picks, at least one of them is going to be there for the Browns, which I personally feel very good about. This corner thing has worked out much better than we thought. They went at 8 and 9, and we haven't seen another one yet. This is very good for Cleveland.
I was so close to tweeting about how the Browns had no shot at a corner after that back-to-back. Just don't hit send, y'all. Just never hit send. I don't know why we do it.
That's the Tyrod Taylor advice. Don't hit send.
Can I ask a question? Can we put people on the record?
Absolutely.
Because they might get to this. If Rashad Bateman and Greg Newsome are both there at 26, who do you take? That's like the best of both worlds, right? It's the corner. It's a clean corner, no injury stuff, and it's a clean receiver. Who do you take? Ellis, who do you take?
Oh, my Minnesota bias is gonna start showing. Let's blame it on my offensive bias. I would take the receiver. I take the receiver. I think that and Scott, again, as I come in here in real time, kind of made me realize too, like, oh, there are some free agent corners too. I'm not opposed to them patchworking that number 2 or 3, we'll call it 2.5 corner spot, and figuring it out. And when the alternative is adding someone who can, I think of what Dallas had with Amari Cooper, Michael Gallup, and then CeeDee Lamb. And I know it didn't work out because their quarterback got hurt, but when a strength is a strength and you make it an extra strength, that's how you go to the next levels in offense. A corner, and I wrote about how unpredictable first round corner is too. Just take the playmaker, take the game changer. When he's scoring touchdowns on Sunday, everyone will agree.
I'm taking the corner. I'm taking the cornerback. I think you help yourself in more ways than you do on offense. And I know I've said the Browns hate Rashard Higgins, but man, if they take a wide receiver in the first round, he should just pack up and leave. I'll drive him to the airport. Just go find another team. These people seriously don't want you anywhere near the football field.
I'm with Scott on this one. I'm taking the corner.
You know,
I think the position is more valuable. I think Newsome, Ellis going against all the research you've done. I think Newsome is a guy that can start sooner rather than later. I think that's important if you're going to take the corner over the receiver. And I think he can help you win this year.
Yeah, did no one
And
give
I think
a
you
rip?
can find a receiver later too. I think you can find a good receiver later.
Did no one give a rip about the research I did? I mean, like Scott's out here getting free trials from sports information, and I'm out here trying to just crack a decent story, and no one cares that first round corners just have a massive miss rate. But I'll keep cracking the numbers.
so let me ask this, and this is based on no research, as everything I say and write is based on no research. It feels like to me that actually that you can get in trouble chasing kind of iffy receivers in the second and third round. Maybe that's totally wrong. Maybe it's just because I like Eric Stokes and Tyson Campbell's at the same college. Does it maybe feel like if you took Bateman and then could you package one of your third round picks with your second round pick to move up from 59 a little bit, maybe even give him and come get a corner, come get like a corner in the second round, but that the difference between Bateman and what else you might get at receiver in this draft or any other one, because listen, they're going to keep being good. It's hard to get good receivers when you're good, right? You take Bateman and then you put a lot of effort. They could take a defensive guy with every other pick and just say, this guy was too good to pass up. I'm not saying he's Michael Thomas, but he might be Michael Thomas. And they had a chance at Michael Thomas, and they passed on that Big 10 receiver for a little Big 12 receiver, and it set the franchise back. I think I might be with Ellis, not based on positional value, but based on the dude. This particular dude probably shouldn't be here at 26. Maybe you got to jump on him.
I'm going to disagree though with the idea that it's harder to get a receiver if you're good. Well, I mean, Michael Thomas was a second round pick.
That's true. I refuted my own argument in the middle of my argument, Dan, and you called
Justin Jefferson last year. I think it's really hard to draft receivers high in the draft. I think it's really hard to get that right. And, and maybe that's the case for Rashad Bateman, right? You had all these big name receivers go early, and maybe Rashad Bateman's going to end up being the best of the bunch who goes in the 20s. Who knows? But I think it's possible we've seen good receivers go late first, early second round.
Well, we got a draft update here. The one another cornerback is off the board. Caleb Farley to the Titans.
Oh, okay. Here
Like
we go, Doug.
Because we thought Tennessee was a potential receiver spot, replacing Corey Davis, right? So the Titans take the injury risk, take that option, let them deal with it. Maybe it's great, maybe it busts, but now the Browns don't even have to think about it. I'm not upset about Farley going here.
I'm not either, but it is now one more corner off the board. We might end up right where we thought we were gonna.
Minnesota's going to screw it up. Minnesota, because that's the one, right?
Always.
I mean, because if Minnesota liked a corner, but thought that we can get our corner at 23, we don't have to take him at 14. I mean, that's Greg Newsome.
Let me get on Vikings Twitter. I bet people
Mary Kay had Greg Newsome going to the Vikings, not in this spot, but she mocked Greg Newsome to the Vikings.
This could be it. And to that point, right. It's not great news. I guess it's not great news when any corner goes off the board. Scott, if Newsome's gone, Scott, you want a corner, and Dan, you want a corner. So let's say this. So now we're playing the game. All right, let's say Greg Newsome doesn't make it to 26. Would you still take a corner? Would you take Samuel? Would you take Tyson Campbell? Would you take Eric Stokes? Like if you, or are they not worth it? If you wanted a corner, did you only want one of the top four corners?
I'm taking calls. I think if Newsome goes in the next pick, I'm taking calls on number 26. And then if nobody bites, maybe I'm looking at Bateman or an edge rusher, but I might start taking phone calls at 26.
I mean,
sorry, Scott. Real quickly, I've seen two Vikings beat writers say it feels like an offensive lineman. No pick in yet, but That's what I read. Go ahead, Scott.
I'm still thinking corner in the first round. I mean, I just think that position should be valued more by the Browns, just based on what they have on the roster. And the fact that you brought back your entire receiving core, and maybe they're happy with Donovan Peoples-Jones. Maybe they think they somehow, struck something important, in the 6th round with that guy. So I don't know. I think, like I said, corner is the one spot that they have not drafted yet, and it's the one spot that they need depth. It's the one spot where you have, one of a couple where you have a guy coming back you're just not sure about yet. It just makes too much sense.
Can I ask you guys this? If they take a receiver, does that signal a surprise that player was there?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think if they take Bateman, it's just like they're going to come out and say, we never thought he'd be there. Right. They're going to say, we had this guy in the top 12 on our board and we couldn't pass up the value at a premium position. We love Odell. We love Jarvis. We love Richard. We love Kadarius Hodge. We love Donovan Peoples-Jones. He's too good of a football player. I think they would say that. And I think it would be true.
Yep.
So let me pin people down more on corners. Dan and Scott, you're going to live in this corner world. And I know Dan's ready to trade out. If Newsome's gone, Asante Samuel is a smaller corner. Are you cool with that? Because it feels like Asante Samuel is maybe the consensus number 5 corner, but he's smaller. Would you take him?
He's the guy I had them taken on my Browns mock. And I mean, hey, if Greedy Williams comes back, he's 6'2". So there's your taller corner.
I guess my question is, though, is he just a slot guy in the NFL? I mean, I know I've read reports on him that say he could play inside or out, but what if he gets to the NFL and he's just a slot corner? I don't know if I want to use 26 on that, especially because I just paid a slot corner. And Troy Hill can play outside. And I said earlier on the show, if he ends up being your second best outside corner, you've got to put him out there. But that's not the ideal move. You want Troy Hill to be inside. So that would give me pause. And I don't know if I want to take him at 26. I would take him at, I'm just going to throw out a random number, 38, 40. That's where I start to look at these corners now. I don't want to reach for a guy that I have a mid-second round grade on if I'm Andrew Berry. I don't know what Andrew Berry's grade is on him. I don't know. I don't want to reach for that guy at 26.
But what if nobody will trade down with you? Like, here's the thing.
Then you have to take the best player available within reason. So you're not going to take a tackle. You're not going to take a quarterback. You're not going to take
a running back.
Probably not. Yeah, you're not going to take a running back. But then I think at that point, that's where we start having the Bateman discussion, because I just don't think this organization and this GM is going to sit there and reach. I think reach for need. I think if that fit isn't there, I think they're going to take the best player available. And that's when you start having the Bateman discussion if nobody wants to trade down.
And then I think JOK comes in. I think JOK is a really good
I forgot about him. He's still out there.
And so we haven't talked about him lately, but if Newsome's gone and there's not the perfect corner fit, it might come down to JOK and Bateman. I'm telling you, man, there's still Newsome, JOK, and Bateman. I still think you would feel very good about, and there are 3 picks left until they go. And those are 3 names. Unless they go 3 for 3, one of those guys is going to be there. And then Azeez Ojulari, I don't want an edge guy, but I think he's the most interesting edge guy, right? I think he's productive. He's young, isn't he? 20. Like, I think he would fit a couple things that he's more interesting to me than Jason Owe, Kwity Paye, Phillips, Russo, all that stuff. So Ojulari, I thought wouldn't be around. I wouldn't be against him, even though I don't think edge rusher is the priority.
I wonder, Ellison Scott, I mean, do you agree with me, though, that like in that situation, if Newsome's gone and you have let's say Andrew Berry has a mid-second round grade or somewhere around there on Asante Samuel, you'd be surprised that he would maybe still take him at 26. Yeah, I just think this front office and the way they think and that, that analytics way of thinking, and I think it's the right way to do it, is you don't reach to fill needs. You take talent.
Yeah, I don't see any reaching happening, and we've only seen one trade back where someone's getting picks next year, which surprised me a little bit. I thought there'd be more of the NBA did this a couple of years ago when teams aggressively just wanted to get out of the current draft and get into the next year's. The Browns might be in that spot to do something like that. And if you're positioned, Dan, of being, well, we have a second round grade on him, but let's take him here. I think they would trade back, because especially if it's a second round grade that isn't, in the lower 30s or upper 30s, whatever way you look at it, that those more premium second round picks. If it's where the Browns are already in the second round, then you can't take him at 26.
Well, the Vikings just took an offensive lineman, Christian Darrisaw. So,
and the Steelers are going to take Harris at 24. Are they not? They're going to take Najee Harris. The Browns are going to have some options. And I think maybe Urban Meyer takes Rashad Bateman to give Trevor Lawrence somebody to throw to. That might be the pick. And the Browns might wind up picking between JOK and Newsome.
It's getting interesting.
And who may take somebody that we don't even expect. Hey, let me throw a name out there. What if they took, I'm looking through PFF's available players. What if they took the safety out of TCU, Morig?
I think is
that off the board? He's actually 16th on PFF's big board.
He's the best.
We saw some examples
safety
last year of them taking guys who were higher up that board than maybe they were on others.
I think it's similar to the Ronnie Harrison conversation we had before. Now you're talking about, you want three safeties who are young that you believe in long-term, and it's Morig, Johnson, and Delpit. But also it's a little bit of a hedge against Delpit coming back, right? I mean, I think I could see it, but do you take him over Newsome? Do you take a safety over a corner? That's where I don't know that they would do that, but I'm not against him in general at 26.
I wonder who they think is more along in the recovery between Grant Delpit and Grady Williams. Information we're not going to have. Perhaps it's stuff they don't even have, but it could be telling in the terms of that, because I like how Doug ended that. There might be more Grant Delpit insurance here than we originally thought.
And Andrew Berry obviously is not shy about doubling up at positions that he already targeted in free agency. We saw that last year at multiple spots. So, yeah, I mean, even though you brought in help at safety and free agency, it could be a position they target here.
I should probably say his name right in case they do take him. Trayvon Merrig is how you say it. But yeah, he's a guy that as I'm looking through, it's just one of those things you kind of keep an eye on, that PFF big board, because that's sort of where Jordan Elliott came from. He was really high up their list. Elijah Moore. Is Elijah Moore? Ellis, what if they took Moore over Bateman?
I would understand it. I would completely understand it. It would be, the Minnesota may be like, oh, shucks, but I would completely understand it. Again, I think Elijah Moore, Rashad Bateman, better week 1, 2021 starters than Kadarius Toney, and Moore is really going to stretch the field in ridiculous ways. Bateman's more of a technician, which I like the idea of pairing with Trevor Lawrence, but Elijah Moore is a guy who's going to just electrify from the start.
Can he play outside? Can he play outside?
Yes, he can. Yep. I would completely trust him outside.
By the way, Jason Owe is 25th on their board.
So Mac Wilson just tweeted out something interesting. Browns linebacker. He said Najee to the Steelers. And he said Barmore, but maybe he means Barmore. Browns. Book it.
He was pushing for Barmore earlier.
That's just Bama love. That's Bama love, right? He just doesn't want to take a linebacker. He's like, anyone want a linebacker?
Right, exactly.
And he posted as an Instagram story one of like 50 dots on the top of the screen as you're tapping through Mac Wilson Instagram stories.
Yep.
I think the draft has gone well for the Browns. I think there were ways that it could have gone poorly for them. I think there's at least 3 guys kind of that were a little bit of a reach pick. I know some people thought Jamin Davis might be in range for the Browns and he went. So I don't know, maybe they really liked him, but I still feel like at premium positions, right? Receiver, corner, edge, they're going to have guys that they should like that I think are value at 26. They're not, in the end, they're not going to reach here. Now, if they just love a guy that most people don't love, okay, but like they're not going to be forced in a position to reach. And Ellis, I know, and you saying, hey, you were maybe interested in the trade down. It doesn't feel like I wouldn't be interested in the trade down anymore, the way this board has unfolded. Would you agree with that?
I completely agree. Yeah, they got exactly who they want, and they've got options. They probably got a pretty tough decision coming up here.
And
You
Najee
know what,
Harris
unless-
it is.
Yeah,
Najee Harris to
You know,
Pittsburgh.
maybe you trade back 2 or 3 spots. I mean, I know we're splitting hairs here and risking it, but I mean the Eagles just did it, or the Giants, excuse me, picking up that extra third. So I don't know, maybe you only move back a couple now that you have some of the guys you like stockpiled.
I think we might be too late in the game to do that, though.
Fair.
I mean, you're talking 26.
Who would be
you're gonna move
right?
back,
Who would
are
be
you going to
coming
move
up
back to
get some money?
29?
Right. And
You
2 of the
know.
picks are Ravens picks anyways.
Speaking of pronunciations, as Jamie Turner texted me, we should probably start practicing Owusu Koromoa.
We
sure we
can't
got
just
that
call
one
him
right.
JOK. JOK is not good enough. Jeremiah Owusu Koromoa.
At some point, we've got to actually say the name.
So let's talk about Najee Harris, though, because we talked about this on the mock draft. We didn't want Najee Harris to go to Pittsburgh, and he went to Pittsburgh. So, Scott, like this makes the Steelers' offense better. How much better?
Yeah, you would think. I mean, look, they needed to do something about running back, and it wasn't all the offensive line's fault. They just had issues in the backfield, and it's a team that's always going to pass first. I mean, they're going to have 3 receivers out, and they're going to have Ben in the shotgun. But if you add another dimension to that they weren't getting before, that's certainly not a good thing for the Browns. Watching 25 here, I'm just waiting for the Ravens to jump over the Browns and take Bateman. That's what I'm waiting for. That seems like something that could potentially happen here.
Or take JOK, because they always love to grab those linebackers.
But listen,
Yeah.
Urban Meyer.
They can actually take the safety I mentioned earlier. He'd be a good fit there.
Urban Meyer has been tweeting all about how he's from Northeast Ohio and he's so excited for the draft to be here. Would he really do that to the Browns and trade out of 25 and let the Ravens jump up and take him? Wouldn't Urban do a solid and hang up on the Ravens? Come on, Urban.
Urban's still looking for strength and conditioning coaches. I'm just kidding.
Wow.
I know.
Wow.
I know they filled that, but I still can't get over that. Real quick on the Steelers, Dan, I completely agreed with what you said about them rebuilding their offensive line first, then worrying about the running game. But then I read an interesting stat regarding their selection of the running back position, and they haven't spent I think it's a third or higher on the position in like the past 4 years. James Conner, Benny Snell, and then McFarland from a year ago. And I thought that was a decent case where you can say they hadn't had the talent. Put a talented kid back there and then run, and then the offensive line won't be as bad as it was a year ago. It might be a little of the chicken and egg argument, but at least it's something they hadn't done yet. And this is a shift in philosophy, which you at least got to tip a hat to, because they're trying to shake it up.
I don't mind the pick. I just think they've got to make sure that offensive line is settled and can actually open up some holes for him, because we've seen it here in certain cases. We're bringing it back and there's just nowhere for him to go. Okay, so we're up to Jacksonville here, and the Browns. Look, this has fallen the way the Browns want it to fall. And if we've learned anything about Andrew Berry, it's that he's very patient in the draft process, and he's been very patient so far tonight. And even if Jacksonville takes Greg Newsome, he's still going to have his pick of guys that can help this football team.
I know Urban loves speed. I wouldn't be surprised if Urban took Elijah Moore here and the Browns end up with the choice, but the Bateman Newsome choice that we've been talking about the whole time. I think the way this has fallen, they're going to get a player. And this is why I was a little bit against like the trade down discussion sort of in theory, Ellis. I think they're a Super Bowl team. They're aiming to win a Super Bowl this year. And when I look at what the Bucs got out of Tristan Wirfs and Antoine Winfield last year with their first 2 picks, it was just proof of what a rookie can do for even a really good team. And I feel like they are in a spot now where whether it's Greg Newsome, whether it's Rashad Bateman, whether it's Jeremiah Owusu Koromoa, I think any of those 3, I think would help them. Because I think Koromoa, whether it's safety or linebacker or a hybrid thing, I think he's on the field doing things that maybe other guys on this team can't do. Newsome, we know how he slides in. Bateman, we know how he slides in. I wanted 26 to turbocharge this Super Bowl effort. And I think the way the draft has fallen, that's going to happen.
Yeah, 100%. They're going to find a guy that is going to play week 1 or at least not be on the field by, week 4 or 5. It's sometimes it takes a rookie to get some time. Justin Jefferson set the NFL receiving record and didn't start till week 4. So I agree, Doug. This draft has fallen right in a spot where they can land an impact guy without having to move up, which I did not think was possible before like 10 minutes ago.
Doug, we know what you would say. What if the name is Jason Oweh?
I would ask, because I don't think he's ready. Like, I think he's all traits. And again, I can go back and show you Thayer Munford building a wall in front of Jason Oweh. He didn't get within 10 feet of Justin Fields in that game. Like, if you want to tell me Jason Oweh long-term is like a Myles Garrett project, he's going to teach him the moves that he clearly didn't learn at Penn State, I guess that's okay. But I don't think that's a turbo boost for this year. That's like a Clowney Tack McKinley replacement like in 2023. But given the way the board has fallen, that's not the best they can do here. And that's just too traitsy, not enough production at a position that I don't think is an absolute need right now.
It looks like the Jaguars are taking a safety. Trayvon Moehrig.
Yep.
Okay.
And the Browns are on the clock. That's what we do know. Of course, folks watching on the stream, like I've said a couple times, we're about 30 seconds behind. So maybe they'll know who the Browns pick before we go on. But yeah, interesting. I thought the Jags might try and get one of those weapons there. So that look, this fell exactly how it needed to fall for the Browns. We're going to stick with you here through the pick. We're going to keep going, obviously, after the pick.
We got to predict,
reaction.
Man. We got to all predict what they're going to do here.
Oh, man.
Too many options. Too many good players. Too many good options.
Newsome feels so easy. I'm going to say I'm going to say Newsome, and here's why. And I'm going to be quick because I know this pick is going to happen soon. Just like last year, left tackle was wide open. We knew they were going to take a left tackle. I've said it on the pod a few times. It just feels like cornerback is the one position they haven't truly addressed yet. I think Newsome's the guy.
Scott?
I'll go with Newsome. I think that's a good argument. I've been saying all night cornerback, so he's still there. Seems like an easy pick.
Ellis?
Shoot your shot, Ellis.
Listen, yeah. I'll go first. I'll make it easy for you. I think they're going to look at each other and say, I can't believe Rashad Bateman's still there. And they're going to say, we never planned it. We never planned it.
Jacksonville actually went running back.
Oh, we got bad info.
Travis Etienne.
He did it. Oh my gosh. Urban. Okay. So Urban's working for the Big Ten Network. In 2019, Clemson beats Ohio State in a playoff semifinal. Urban comes on the Big Ten Network and gushes over Trevor Lawrence. I'm not so sure he didn't decide to become a year ahead the Jaguars coach that night. So now it's like every Ohio State fan hates Dabo Swinney, and Urban just took the two players that turbocharged this last Clemson run. This is too delicious. But again, the Browns didn't want Travis Etienne. So we can discuss that later. I think they look at each other. They say, we can't believe Rashad Bateman's there. We'll get our corner in the second round. We'll use our extra third-round pick to move up and get somebody early in the second round if we need to. I think maybe they can't pass Rashad Bateman up.
I love all that, Doug. I'm going to go Elijah Moore. I think that they're going to see a mix of JoJo Natson and Daryl Hodge.
JoJo Natson in the wait. They're going to take in the first round a mix of JoJo Natson and Daryl Hodge. All right.
Yep.
Go ahead.
Bear with me, because what JoJo Natson was providing that offense was a lateral expansion of the defense. That he can do stuff behind the line of scrimmage. It was all dress stuff. They were never going to give him the ball anyway, but it is a part of pre-snap motion that is integral to Kevin Stefanski offense, and they did not have that after Natson left. They tried it with Landry sometimes. I even think we saw Rashard Higgins fake a jet sweep once. No one's buying that. Guys with that type of speed, JoJo Natson or Elijah Moore, help you in the run game. They hold defenders. Rashad Bateman's not going behind the line like that. So I think in Moore you find a perfect blend of, again, Cordero Hodge and JoJo Natson, who was who they wanted to be their number 3 receiver anyway. A mix of those two players, you get him and Moore.
Yeah, both Natson and Hodge were getting more first-team reps than Higgins and anybody else under Landry and Beckham last year in camp. So
Scott, you might want you might want to warm your car up. Get Rashad to the airport because
you are right, Alice. They were using Natson a lot. They were showing that end around a lot with Natson, and he actually got a carry before he got hurt and lost his season. So you're right. They were using him.
They just want a player like that. It adds something to that to the pre-snap and the stress it does on the defense. And Moore's a guy on the board that does that for them right now while providing what a receiver does.
That's a Jarvis Landry hedge too.
Exactly.
Because he does a lot of that stuff at a little slower speed, but he does a lot of that stuff.
I do think Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah is a different kind of guy. I think he just does different things that there's not a million different guys who are exactly like that. And I think maybe, again, Peter King's pretty tapped in. This is the guy that he had the Browns trading up for, JOK, and he's here at 26. So I think he remains a possibility too. As long as, if they draft Jason Oweh, I'm going to go to the bathroom again. Like if they have a multiple ways to win here. We all put the headline on our draft post. How can the Browns win the draft? I think if it's Elijah Moore, Rashad Bateman, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, or Greg Newsome, I think they win the draft.
According to Josina Anderson, they're picking Greg Newsome.
Yeah, I saw that as well.
It makes too much sense. It made too much sense. And if there's anything we've learned about Andrew Berry in this front office is they do things that make sense. I don't want to say they're predictable, but if you just kind of watch, you can figure some things out.
So Dan, you in your how they win the draft had Greg Newsome to the Browns at 26. But when we did our mock draft, I said, I don't think he'll get there. And in the mock draft, he went at 14. You said he would have taken him at 16. As we sit here and Greg Newsome is becoming a Cleveland Brown, are you surprised he lasted this long?
A little bit, especially because we had that run early. And I thought maybe we were going to see, okay, what happened in our mock draft is going to happen in the real draft. We're going to see guys get snapped up. But then you see Zaven Collins go to Arizona, for example. Tennessee takes the chance on Caleb Farley. The reasoning that I had for it was I felt like this was a guy that had a chance to be there at 26. I felt like he fit an immediate need, and I felt like it wasn't a reach. He kind of checked all of those boxes for me. And so that's why I had him there. But I wasn't sure if he was going to make it to 26 or not.
I don't know how much work you guys did on Newsome. I mean, it's like when you read about Newsome, it's like he's got good size. He's got good speed. He's got good technique. He just seems clean. And again, it's one of those things that's like, oh, who do you think they'll take at 26? Oh, this corner who has all good things and no faults. And it's like, oh yeah, I'm sure he'll get to 26, which is why I was skeptical. Like, how good is this guy? I have no idea. What do you guys, Scott and Ellis, what do you think of this guy?
Go ahead, Scott.
I think from what I understand, that he didn't get a lot of looks. Like, he just didn't get a lot of action last year. And that might be a knock on him. With a cornerback, that's sometimes a good thing. So pretty much every mock because I did the mock draft roundup, every week kind of leading up to this. Newsome was never in the discussion. It was always linebacker or edge rusher, but Newsome was usually gone before this point in the national mocks that I was going through. So it is kind of a surprise that he fell this far.
Yeah, Greg Newsome, I love how fluid he is. He's extremely comfortable at the top of routes, getting challenged on deeper intermediate stuff. A lot of his third down stuff I saw, he even in off coverage, he's confident in the space he starts with, knowing he'll close well or in route recognition break on something to force an incompletion, teams punting. I saw an okay amount of that. But even when the ball's not going his way, I saw a lot more, to Scott's point, of when the ball wasn't going his way, and it's still just his ability to get in a guy's hip pocket. He's fine with playing trail. I like his length. But Doug, it's to what you said that I also didn't see anything that flashes like he's going to be a all pro. That doesn't mean he can't be. And that's what I really hope we make clear in this draft process. It's like there's still plenty of room for development in all these kids. I think quarterback might be the only spot where you really say like, oh, his ceiling is here. Like everyone else, these positions are so much based on your athleticism matching your football IQ. And that takes 4 or 5 years to finally solidify, sometimes more for people. So I think this is a great pick, and it does fall right in line with, all right, yeah, he does everything pretty well. No red flags. We can plug him in if we need to. And if not, there's zero pressure for him to play.
There are
6 foot 192 for Greg Newsome.
Yep.
Yeah, not like super big. Not like the guys at the top that I thought that guy's like 6'2". That was a size that I really would have liked, but you would have had to move up to get those guys. And as everybody says, there are some durability concerns. You are taking a risk there. You got durability concerns kind of across that secondary now. But if he's healthy, he can play soon.
And
So-
real quick on the tape thing, to get this in, because you mentioned his size, he plays longer and just looks longer than he's listed. It just you can tell with his arm length. I don't know what he measured at, but he looks more disruptive with his length than the 6'1" shows or illustrates.
So he's from Northwestern. Northwestern won the Big Ten West last year. They played Ohio State in the Big Ten championship game. So there was a lot of talk about Greg Newsome before Ohio State played them. Northwestern won because of its defense. Rashawn Slater, the other Northwestern, believe it or not, had two guys in the first round, but Rashawn Slater, the offensive tackle, had opted out. This was a Northwestern team that was as good as they were because of their secondary. They had another young playmaker back there who I think might be a first rounder in a year or two. But Greg Newsome was sort of the heart and soul of that. And then they got to the Big Ten championship game against Ohio State, and Northwestern hung in that game the whole time. And Greg Newsome got hurt like in the first quarter, didn't play. So like in terms of like durability concerns, all week it was like, listen, Ohio State has these great receivers, but Northwestern's strength is their secondary. We wrote and talked a lot about Greg Newsome, and then he didn't play, and Northwestern like hung in without him. So I wish I knew more about Greg Newsome, but I didn't get eyeballs on him because in their biggest game of the year, he wasn't out there. So I don't even remember exactly what happened, but I know the discussion around it is this was a top 25 team, an overachieving team. And I think people would tell you the number one guy, the engine of that was Greg Newsome. So that's the kind of guy he is.
It's almost a boring pick, right? I mean, it's the guy we talked about so much. And you had a guy like JOK on the board. You had the traits guy and Owe on the board. But I mean, in this case, it feels like boring is good.
Yeah, I just, correct me if I'm wrong, you guys, but he's just going to come in with zero pressure. I mean, if he starts week one and looks bad, then okay, that'd be a tough look. But then he just would, you take him out of the lineup and he can just chill. A receiver comes in here with the expectations of a receiver, the Odell thing, replacing those two, all of this just baked in stuff that is superficial anyway. Greg Newsome's just going to come in here, and if he plays well right away, awesome. If he's not asked to, no big deal. I mean, everything about it is boring in all the best ways. I agree.
Do we expect him now? Like if we were doing, Scott, if you were doing a depth chart for the Browns right now, would the two starting outside cornerbacks be Denzel Ward and Greg Newsome?
I would probably put Greedy Williams there just because he's,
What?
He was the starter before he was hurt.
Because he's not as good as Terrence Mitchell, and he was the 37th pick, and he missed all last year because of injuries.
I agree. He wasn't as good as Terrence Mitchell, at least not in his first year. But just because you don't perform well as a rookie doesn't mean you're a bust. So I would put Newsome behind Ward or Greedy, at least going into camp. The Browns certainly aren't going to put Newsome in a starting spot going into camp. They didn't do that with Greedy Williams either. They're going to, they make you kind of earn that.
I'm going to bail here real quick. We're going to hear from Andrew and Kevin here shortly. So I'm going to bail. I'll be back after we hear from them. I'll give everybody a little bit of an update on that. So I will hand things off to you guys.
All right. Thank you, Dan. Go ahead, Ellis.
Yeah, this pick solidifies for me that the training camp battle for the number 2 corner will be everything we thought the position battle at right guard was going to be a year ago. This is going to be a fierce one, assuming injuries and everyone's healthy. I just don't see how you can, you can't take Newsome's college tape and, whatever you've gotten out of Greedy so far in really 1 year and say this is the guy. And I don't, that's not how these coaches are really going to look at it either. These two are going to step out in training camp and they're going to figure it out that way. Troy Hill will be in the mix. I mean, this is going to be interesting to say the least how Joe Wood starts piecing the secondary together, and it might not be the same combination the first 4 games. They're gonna have to figure this out, but they've got a good problem now.
This feels like we were talking about sort of upside versus safe thing. I do think this just feels like smart. I don't want to say safe because that's almost like a negative thing in the draft. Like, oh, you made the safe pick. It's the smart pick. Like as you were describing him, Ellis, like this guy is at least going to be solid. And he very likely may be better than that, but there's no red flags here. There's no injury stuff. I mean, I guess there's a little bit of durability, but I don't know that durability and like what Greedy is dealing with is the same thing. And I do think that to some degree, I think because in the Greedy draft, they didn't have a first round pick because they traded it for Odell. I think we have kind of viewed Greedy Williams in a certain way. He was a 37th pick, right? I mean, he fell because I think of some injury questions. That's why, Scott, I'm saying, like, I know, I guess they aren't going to hand it to a rookie, but it felt like when Greedy got here, I guess they didn't hand it to him, but we sure thought like, okay, they drafted Greedy. He's probably going to come in and start, even though Terrence Mitchell was here, right? And he was a 37th pick. I just feel like Greg Newsome already has fewer questions than Greedy Williams, and they'll let those guys go out there and battle every day in camp. And we know that. But if you had to ask me right now, who do I think will be the other starting outside corner opposite Denzel Ward in week 1? I think at the moment I would put my money on Greg Newsome.
Well, he's going to get every opportunity to do that. It's not like he's going to be, 6th or 7th in the rep line. He's going to, he's a first round pick. They're going to give him every opportunity to succeed. And, he's kind of in the same boat that Greedy is, because Greedy has not played in this defense yet either, other than, very early in camp. So, yeah, it's Ellis is right. This could be the right guard battle we never got to see. And it's a good problem to have. And it's the most a cornerback is probably the more likely position. And we were talking about wide receiver and other spots that you could get a guy who's going to perform like a starter. Like from 2015 to 2019, PFF kept track of how many first round picks played half their team snaps and earned a 70 grade or above, which is kind of the threshold for starter. For cornerbacks, it was almost 37%. And that is second best out of any position, right behind offensive tackle. And you know that if you're drafting an offensive tackle in the first round, he's probably going to be a starter. So corners get opportunities, and they seem to work out at least more than most positions do in the first round. So, yeah, it was a good pick for the Browns. I think that's, we've just spent, 2-3 hours saying that the cornerback would be a great pick, and then they go out and do it.
So, okay, now we have to talk about this. And Tim Bielek has joined us. And Tim, I want to get your view on the pick, but it's no longer the view on just the Greg Newsome pick, because the Baltimore Ravens took Rashad Bateman right after the Browns did not. And we know how, if Rashad Bateman is an all-pro, we will remember this night, because the Ravens need him, I think, more than the Browns need him. But man, he might have been the guy that just fell right to you, and the Browns decided not to take him. So I'm not criticizing it, but man, it drew us. We all of a sudden, we got the stark contrast right here. Tim Bielek, on your board, who did you have higher, Greg Newsome or Rashad Bateman?
When I look at the board, I had Rashad Bateman at 19 and Greg Newsome at 23. So Bateman 4 spots higher than Newsome.
So as this pick came down for the Browns, and it came down to Greg Newsome, we were talking about Greg Newsome as a realistic option, Rashad Bateman as a realistic option, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah as a realistic option. What would you have done with who was available? What would you have done at 26?
I admit I probably would have still gone Newsome. I still think corner is still the biggest need they had available, and really the only one that you could have plugged the guy in from day one as a starter. And I said I didn't think Newsome would be there at 26 for them. So I mean, it kind of falls in line with what to me has become the theme of the draft, and guys falling into teams' laps. I mean, Mac Jones fell in the Pats' lap. Najee Harris fell to the Steelers. Greg Newsome fell to the Browns. And like you said, Rashad Bateman fell to Baltimore. I felt like Baltimore was going to just take one of the bigger receivers that was available. The Browns didn't take Rashad Bateman. I felt like if Bateman was off, they were going to take Terrace Marshall, and we'd probably be having a similar conversation.
All right. So, Tim, I want to get more from you on how you thought the draft has progressed, but I want Ellis to draw this contrast. Ellis, what does it do to the Newsome pick that the Ravens went with Bateman right afterward? Does it give you any second thoughts?
I mean, Greg Newsome's going to have every opportunity to cover Rashad Bateman now, if you want to do that fantasy football, Madden type matchup stuff. Look, it's kind of a tough, little unfair situation to put Greg Newsome in. Offensive players just have an opportunity to prove themselves sooner, quicker, and in more flashy ways than, offensive rookies. But man, Bateman is a guy with that type of Pro Bowl upside, where if Greg Newsome hits a ceiling of, starting corner, but a guy who doesn't land a second contract on this team, while Bateman makes a Pro Bowl or two in his first 5 years. Look, these are what ifs, but that's the point of the exercise, right? And I just got done with the Newsome pick. I got done saying that I see a lot of really good stuff, but I don't see a Pro Bowl player in the first 4 years in Greg Newsome, and I definitely don't see it as likely as I see it for Rashad Bateman. So you're right; these two picks are forever tied. I worry a little bit, but in a vacuum, this need did work out really well for the Browns picking Greg Newsome, but we're never going to look at it that way because the very next pick was Rashad Bateman.
But Ellis, what we were talking about, I think we got the answer to. Where with the Browns, where they are in the draft, where they are as a franchise, do you take a little more risk? Do you make a little more smart, obvious pick? I think they made the smart pick. They didn't go for the upside. They took the guy who's really solid at the position they need. They didn't go for the guy where they're pretty stacked in that room, but oh man, that guy might be a thing, right? I think we got our answer.
Yeah, I think 100% we did. And the only way that we could confirm it 100% would be is if Newsome wasn't there and they went Samuel to really test that fifth corner theory. But I agree. They didn't see the upside swing in adding to the strength and making it that extra strength, as I said, in adding a receiver, and instead get a guy who, again, doesn't need to do a thing early in this season, assuming some health. And it's definitely a guy who isn't going to make the offense or winning football games all that more achievable at the end of games unless he's on the field playing outside corner at number 2. And that's what we don't know that yet, where you could really plug in Rashad Bateman or even Elijah Moore as that number 3 receiver when the Browns need a touchdown and they're in shotgun going spread.
All right, Tim, you said that you would have taken Newsome with where the Browns were. So you agreed with the pick. When we did our mock draft, I think, and you can tell me if this is wrong, there seemed to be a top 4 group of cornerbacks with J.C. Horn, Patrick Surtain, Caleb Farley, and Greg Newsome. And the question was, would one of those top 4 get to the Browns? In our mock draft, none of those 4 did. Were you surprised at all the way the draft fell? And given what you thought would happen, what was the key maybe to Greg Newsome getting to the Browns at 26? Where were the teams that you maybe thought would take corner that didn't, that made this possible?
I'm looking right at the Arizona Cardinals with number 16, Zaven Collins, which to me was kind of the first of what I consider the puzzling picks of this draft. The first 15 all made a lot of sense in a lot of different ways, but then, Collins goes 16. That takes a team that needs corner off the board. Really, the only other team that needed a corner that was in that position was the Titans at 22. The Jets, you argue, could have taken a corner, but they jumped up, got Elijah Vera Tucker. I liked the pick. I didn't like the picks they gave up to make that pick. But then when the Titans took Caleb Farley, you kind of figured that one of those, that Newsome was going to be available, because I didn't think there was going to be a team that was going to move up for Greg Newsome. So the fact that he fell there is kind of a benefit to the Browns. And I understand the paranoia about Rashad Bateman. I'm from a Browns perspective. I get it, because remember 15 years ago, the Browns took Cameron Wembley. 1 pick later, Haloti Nada. I'm sure every Browns fan is hoping that this isn't deja vu in that case.
It is hard when the Ravens are right behind the Browns, right? It's like, get off of me. Like, get away from me. Like, just let the Browns be, man. Like, don't bug them. Tim, I want to get you. And by the way, Dan's guy, Peyton Turner, the defensive end that we talked about that Dan liked as a second round option to the Browns, just went 28 to the New Orleans Saints in the first round. Again, there had been chatter. You could find draft experts talking on Thursday that they were saying Peyton Turner was all of a sudden a guy that people thought could maybe go in the first round. The Packers picking here 29. Curious if this is Elijah Moore, Ellis, which given what's going on with Aaron Rodgers, it feels like they have to get him a weapon. And I think every mock draft in the world in the last week has had Elijah Moore to the Packers at 29.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys talked at all about the Aaron Rodgers stuff at the top or with Mary Kay or anything, but talk about stealing the draft early. This, it feels like it has to be a weapon. I mean, if Rodgers, whether he's there or not, it's like you just have to pick the offensive player to avoid whatever Green Bay would wake up to in the morning. So even before the Rodgers news drop, I would agree this is Elijah Moore. And now it just has to be.
Tim, I want to ask you about Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, who was a guy that we were talking about as he was coming down the pipeline. You know, we were talking a lot about Newsome, Farley, Bateman, and Owusu-Koramoah as four guys the Browns should have interest in, and for all of them were there for a while. As we speak here, he's still on the board. You liked him. Would you have considered him instead of Newsome for the Browns at 26? Should the Browns have at least pondered that?
Yeah, I agree. Maybe less so after signing John Johnson. It depends how they feel about Grant Delpit coming back from the Achilles, because I look at Owusu-Koramoah. I don't see him as your traditional linebacker. I don't see him, as the same type of player as Micah Parsons, as Jamin Davis, as Zaven Collins. I see him as that smaller Isaiah Simmons type who does all those things. You can move him all around the defense, can cover in the slot, can play downhill, can be a rover, kind of that old star position that Ohio State used to have, the bullet, as they call it now, of course. So there's obviously a lot that Owusu-Koramoah can bring. Versatility is his strength, which we know Andrew Berry loves to have that versatility. So it made sense. If Newsome was gone, that would have been one of the guys I would have looked at as the pick. But I think with Newsome there, with that being really the only major need on the board, seemed like Andrew Berry just kept things very simple.
So we're getting toward the end of the first round here. The Packers on the clock at 29. So Tim, we want to make sure we get your thoughts on the overall draft so far. You and I both had the Chicago Bears trading up to get Justin Fields. I had them trading up to 6. I think you were closer, and you might have even been very close on what they gave up to do it. They ended up giving up a first and next year's first and a little bit more to move from 20 to 11. What did you think of that move, and how close were you to nailing it?
I had them going to number 8, and this is the package I had them sending to Carolina, which obviously didn't happen. The 20th pick, the 52nd pick, a first and a third and 22. So they gave up less to move up 9 spots, which makes a lot of sense. And I mean, that makes sense. I mean, Chicago needed a quarterback. We talked about it on the podcast Thursday a little bit, how desperate Chicago was for a quarterback. I felt Fields was the second best quarterback in this draft. I was kind of surprised with the Zach Wilson stuff, then him falling behind Trey Lance and Mac Jones. That's a conversation for another day, but that really was a smart move by the Bears. It's one that they really had to make, and they ended up getting a player who's now got a pretty good sized chip on his shoulder.
Another guy who fell, let's talk about Mac Jones to the Patriots at 15, him falling in their lap. You mentioned a couple guys seemed to fall in the laps of teams that had needs and got the exact player they wanted. And then I want to run through the AFC North with you before we let you get out of here. But Mac Jones to the Patriots at 15. Once Mac Jones didn't go 3, I think a lot of people would have said, where do you think he's going to go? And I think a lot of people would have said to the Patriots at 15. And that's exactly where he went. What did you think of how that played out?
It's kind of fitting almost that everybody talked about the Patriots trading up for a quarterback. I didn't think they were going to trade up to get one. I kind of thought they were going to be the more patient team, that they weren't going to be the ones that trade up to get the first. And how fitting it is that, again, like you said, like I talked about earlier, Mac Jones falling in the lap of the Patriots. And he's in a position where he doesn't necessarily have to start day one. You got Cam Newton. And I mean, there's been a lot of Tom Brady comparisons with Mac Jones. I'm not sure how I feel about that, but I had him mock 3rd in my mock to the 49ers last night. So, I mean, him falling to 15, I gave that. I got my draft grades coming out after this. I gave the Patriots an A+ for that pick because that's outstanding value.
But they didn't do anything. It's like they got an A+. They didn't even study. They just showed up in the classroom and got an A+, like Belichick, of course. It's like, oh, what are you going to do? It's like, I don't know. We'll see if our future franchise quarterback just falls to 15. And then he fell to 15. I feel good about this. The Packers did not take a receiver. They took the cornerback that in my how the Browns could win the draft, I had the Browns taking. Eric Stokes, 6'1", runs a sub 4.3, Georgia cornerback. I liked him. He's more upside, I think much less certain than Greg Newsome. I think a lot of people had him in the second round. I thought if the top 4 corners were off the board, I thought Stokes made sense, positional value, traits for the Browns at 26. And the Packers made that determination. They took him ahead of Asante Samuel. He's the 5th corner off the board. But man, Aaron Rodgers, man, it's like they refuse to help him on offense. But I feel moderately validated because what do I know? What did you think of Eric Stokes? He just felt very traitsy to me. But while he was also productive in the best conference in college football, I didn't know if you had a view on Stokes.
I looked at the 2 Georgia corners, Stokes and Tyson Campbell. I thought Stokes was better than Campbell, and I would have taken it before Campbell because I just look at Stokes, and he's a guy that I thought had better ball skills than Tyson Campbell. Tyson Campbell, you're looking at the raw tools he has. When you draw up the modern corner, your Richard Sherman type frame corner, tall, incredibly long, that's Tyson Campbell. He doesn't have the ball skills that Eric Stokes has, and I think that's to me, that's an underrated thing. If you're a corner, you got to know how to play the football. Greg Newsome can play the football. Eric Stokes can play the football. So it makes sense why both those guys are first round picks.
Okay, let's talk about the NFC North a little bit. And we had talked about this specifically on our mock draft the other day. Najee Harris going to Pittsburgh. You had theorized that it would have been actually more of a problem for him to go to Buffalo because Buffalo feels like more of a direct threat for the Browns on a Super Bowl path. But now Najee Harris is a guy, the Browns are going to see him at least 10 times in his life, at least the full 5 years of his rookie deal twice a year, and then maybe more beyond that. How much do you think he fixes Pittsburgh's ground game? And the way it unfolded, did you like that pick for the Steelers at 24?
I like it more when it happened than when I did like a few hours ago. Considering some of the offensive linemen hadn't gone, like Tevin Jenkins hadn't gone, Samuel Cosme hadn't gone, Liam Eichenberg hadn't gone, Jalen Mayfield hadn't gone. There's going to be linemen that are there for the Steelers in the second round, whether they want to go for one of those outside guys, whether they want to go for a guard like Wyatt Davis in the second round. So that makes sense. And in Najee Harris, they get that number 1 running back that they lost with Le'Veon Bell. And Harris looks like a smaller Derrick Henry, not as much of a physical monster as Derrick Henry, but he runs with that same nature. And he caught the ball in the backfield. And we saw in the playoffs just how special he is.
No, it feels like, Tim, this. I mean, it's like we've entered this world where running backs in the first round, you don't know, is it worth it or not? He just feels like a fit there. And right, there's 2 ways to improve your run game. You can either improve the line or you can improve the back. And I just think they need to do both. But this was so obvious staring them in the face. I would imagine they'll try to add some linemen in the later rounds, but it felt like the obvious pick for them. A lot of people had mocked him there. Before we get to the rest of the AFC North, let's talk about the other running back who went in the first round, Travis Etienne. Urban Meyer collecting Clemson players in Jacksonville. I don't know what the history is there of like how often but these were the guys who were the absolute jet fuel to this little mini run of Clemson excellence. And Urban Meyer took both of them. What do you think of Trevor Lawrence and Travis Etienne staying teammates?
Well, we knew Lawrence was the easy pick. We knew that way back in, let's say, 2017, when those recruiting rankings went out, that he was going to be the number 1 pick. Etienne was a little more surprising to me because they already had James Robinson, who I really liked as a rookie. I mean, he was a surprise UDFA, but I get it because, I mean, Urban Meyer is a guy that always wants the most talented guys. You win in the NFL. You win with having just the most talented players usually. And I look at that offense now. Trevor Lawrence at quarterback. You have Travis Etienne and James Robinson at running back. You have DJ Chark. You have Laviska Shenault at receiver. That offense suddenly got a whole lot more scary. And I don't think they have a defense to compete in the AFC South yet, but they're closer than people think, especially if Lawrence plays as good as Joe Burrow and Justin Herbert did this year.
All right, I want to get you on the Bengals pick. Dan Labbe is back with us. We want to hear from Dan what the Browns had to say about their pick. But real quick, Tim, The Bengals decided to go skill instead of tackle with their pick, Jamar Chase over Penei Sewell. In the mock draft, you had them taking the tackle. Do you think they made a mistake? Or do you get it? I think they'll try to get somebody like Liam Eichenberg early in the second and try to still do something on the offensive line. I thought pairing it this way made sense. Receiver 1, offensive line 2. But do you think they'll regret not taking Penei Sewell there?
Possibly. I mean, I thought Sewell was the clear-cut number one. I did check in with one of my old friends who's a Bengals fan, asked him about the pick. He said he wanted Chase because Sewell has shorter arms than you would like for an offensive tackle. I decided, you got to get the guy who's going to protect Joe Burrow for 15 years. You want a guy that's going to probably even outlast his career. And Sewell's a guy who's not even going to be 21 until this fall. He won the Allen Trophy at 19 years old, beat out the number 7 pick in last year's draft, Derek Brown, to win the trophy that year. That tells you how good he is. So I thought he would have been a cornerstone guy, but I get Jamar Chase. I completely understand it. AJ Green is gone. He was not going to be what he was. They just replaced him with a guy who already has instant chemistry with Joe Burrow. I love what T. Higgins did as a rookie last year. If they can protect Joe Burrow and just load up on that offensive line in day 2, Cincinnati is going to be a lot closer to that top 2 than we realize in the AFC North.
All right. Good news for the Browns. The Bills just made a bad pick. Greg Rousseau, the edge rusher, the other Miami edge rusher, no interest to the Bills at 30. I don't think he's going to be good. So that's good news. We have another Ravens pick coming up, but Dan Lobby is back. Dan, what can you report on how the Browns are feeling about this pick of Greg Newsome?
It felt like they were feeling really good. Seems like a guy they were targeting pretty early on, a guy they were very interested in very early on. And Andrew Berry pointed out multiple times, he's 20 years old, turns 21 in May. He's 20 years old. He's played 3 years of major college football. And I think that was very important to them. They're going to be, I asked him about what kind of role age plays in drafting guys. And he didn't really answer me, but it's something they're aware of, right? They're not going to take a guy who's 24 or 25 years old, even though I have a guy like that in my how the Browns can win the draft. But they're probably not going to take a guy like that. 20 years old, played major college football, laid back off the field, but flips the switch on it. Sounds a little bit like Denzel Ward to me when they described him like that. Even though he didn't have a bunch of interceptions, they pointed to his ball production, so they weren't concerned about that. And they pointed to the idea that he kind of knows roles across the secondary. So I think this is the guy that they, like I said, I think they targeted him very early on. I think they were happy he was there. They thought he would be there, kind of based on their surveying around of people in their building. But this just feels like the right guy in the right spot for them right now. And now hearing them talk, it didn't feel like they were straining to justify this is the guy we wanted. It really feels like this is the guy, one of the guys they wanted.
So that's interesting, Dan. Again, I mean, I've been telling you for a week, hey, you had Greg Newsome to the Browns 26. I don't think he's going to be there. You're saying the Browns felt good about, they weren't saying oh, we couldn't believe he was there at 26. It felt like they had a plan, and the plan went exactly as how they thought it would.
Yeah, I mean that's how they made it sound. That they expected him to be there or close to there, and they took him. So whether that's factual or not, we don't know right now. But it didn't sound like they were just sort of trying to make it feel like that. It felt like they had a real shot to get this guy at 26.
And I know, listen, I'm going to ask you questions that I know the answer is going to be well, they didn't talk about that, because of course they didn't. Did you get any feel on whether there was any chance they were going to move up, whether they considered moving down, or did it just was the basic takeaway of this is the guy we wanted. He's a good player at a position of need. We thought he would be there. He was there. We took him. End of story.
I think it's that. I think that the fact that he was there just kind of meant, and they were actually asked about Caleb Farley if they had him, as a possible first round grade, and they obviously did not answer that question. But it was good to ask. I would have been curious if, let's say, he would have been gone if they would have moved down. That would have been interesting. But what we've learned so far from Andrew Berry, and it happened again this year. Last year, they were very patient, and they let the guy that they wanted fall to them at number 10. And it felt like they did the same thing at 26 here. Now, it's a lot harder to do at 26 than it is at 10, but it worked out for him.
I wondered, I remember writing this back in January about like sort of that idea about how the offseason might go. And I think at that time, I thought maybe if a guy fell to them, positional value, need, talent at 26 on defense, it might be a linebacker. But then they got Anthony Walker, and it's like you really got a feel for what they thought of Jacob Phillips. And then the way everything evolved, it became pretty clear that corner, I mean, how much, Dan, all of us at cleveland.com for the last, some of us were on the Zaven train to varying degrees at varying points. But I think in the last week, we kind of all came around to corner. And it does feel like Jedrick Wills, that they fill like every other gap. And then you wouldn't say that they're actually, it's not exactly need that they're drafting because it's still positional value, right? They're not reaching for a defensive tackle or whatever. And it's like, what? But you can see like the little hole that they leave an opening that they can slide somebody in if it works out. Now, if Newsome was gone, maybe they would have done something else and they would have found corner help elsewhere. But I think in a lot of ways, it does feel like the Jedrick Wills pick a year ago. But as you said, it was a little harder to execute 16 spots later. But if we're learning, you often write things about this happened. What did it tell us, right, about Andrew Berry or about how the Browns operate? Did you feel like the way this pick went down informed you more about how Andrew Berry operates?
I think it did. And I think the Jedrick Wills pick was a big step in that process because like I am a firm believer in actions speak louder than words. So people tell you things in press conferences or, maybe they'll tell you things that aren't in press conferences, right? But actions always speak louder than words. And in the NFL and NFL draft night, it's a night when you got to put your cards on the table. I would have loved to have seen what would have happened if Zaven Collins would have been there at 26. That's one that I just absolutely, I said it earlier, I wish we could have seen what they would have done at 26 if Collins would have been there. But yeah, I mean, my thinking throughout the process was just looking at the holes on this team, looking at where they were intentional and aggressive, and they just never really sniffed around outside corner. And we've said it over and over again. You can't count on Greedy Williams. And I'm sure they're not sitting in that building. They can say all the nice things they want about Greedy Williams, but I'm sure they're sitting in that building saying, let's see, they might not be able to get Greedy Williams on the football field until July. So it just felt like the Jedrick Wills pick and how they approached that last year and the safety, the Delpit pick, it just informed us like, if they leave an opening, maybe just circle that position for the draft. And it's not that they're going to reach and go crazy and pick a guy that they shouldn't pick, but just circle that position because it probably tells you that they feel like they're going to be able to get that match of quality and need at wherever they're drafting.
And they clearly, I guess every team does this, every smart team. Again, maybe
Right.
we're not used to the Browns doing it because they haven't been smart for a long time, but they know the positions that have depth, right, in a draft. And that when they were at 10 last year, if they like Jedrick Wills, but they probably said, well, if Jedrick Wills isn't there, it's not the end of the world. We like other guys. We can get our tackle at 10. They must have had, and Dan, if they had this plan, all right, if we thought there were at least 4 good corners and they really thought one of those 4 would be there, right, and then it just worked out, they kind of knew. I don't know that Andrew Berry had a baby today. Like, I bet you he wasn't. If they thought we want Greg Newsome, we're pretty sure he's going to be there. And if he's ever going to take him, this was a very laid back day for them because it is a plan. And it's not just a plan, Dan. It's a plan that they have scouted out that they believe the plan will work. Because we could all have plans like, it's my plan. It's like, well, that's never going to happen. Nice plan. It's like a plan that's grounded in reality. And then when it unfolds, it almost makes it, I guess, Dan, the point is you nailed this pick, right? We should all start nailing picks with Andrew Berry because it's smart and laid out, and we better start sniffing it out the way you sniffed it out. Make sure, again, we like to do this on Orange and Brown Talk. Make sure you take enough of a victory lap here, man.
Yes.
You had Newsome like 10 days ago. So make sure you take that lap because you're getting to know how Andrew Berry operates.
Well, and going back to you with John Johnson, right? There was a moment where I thought to myself, I looked at the free agent list and I thought, oh, John Johnson's interesting. And it felt like he fit. And it felt like if they're going to be aggressive, maybe they go get a guy like that. I didn't think I couldn't imagine the Rams letting him go, but they did. And so I think you were kind of doing the same thing, right? Like we sort of know how this team operates, or we're getting to know how this team operates. And look, it could have been some other corner that fell to them, or maybe they would have just run out of luck and the corners would have been gone. But again, just doing that math in my head, like, okay, they're at 26. They still need a corner. Greg Newsome could kind of be in that range. And so that's why I kind of pulled that name out of the hat.
So Ellis is back with us. Good news for Browns fans. The Ravens just wasted a pick on Jason Oweh. So good luck, Baltimore. Good pick with Rashad Bateman. Bad pick with Jason Oweh.
Can I make the Jason Oweh in Baltimore case? And Ellis, I want to know what you think. So, Doug, when you talk about Oweh, you talk about the wall that he ran into in Ohio State. And we've talked a little bit about this with the Ravens. Matthew Judon is a guy that left in free agency, went to New England. And one of the things about Judon, the questions about Judon was, is he actually a good edge rusher, or did Baltimore scheme him into being a good edge rusher? And I feel like Baltimore is one of those teams that creates opportunities. Same with Bud Dupree. Is he good if he's going to be your top edge rusher and not getting schemed into situations? So maybe that's going to end up being a good fit.
Yeah, I only rushed back onto the Zoom call here to tell Doug that if anyone's going to get some production out of Justin Oweh, it's going to be the Baltimore Ravens, because that is exactly how this pick lines up to the same rationale of Judon and just their ability to find edge rushers with the comp picks. And this is a first round pick. So I get the 0 sacks. I get what you saw, Doug, and I believe you're right. But if there's one organization I'm not betting against when it comes to finding and producing edge rushers, it's the Ravens. And again, I already gave my 2 cents on the Bateman pick. I think Baltimore landed one known commodity and 2 high-end athletes in this class.
So, Dan, we did not, I don't think, get this from you. And Joe Tryon ends the draft to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, which is whoever had I think Mary Kay had the 32nd pick in our mock draft. She nailed it.
I think so.
She got that pick right. So congratulations to Mary Kay. I don't know that we got you on this, Dan. The idea that we were talking about Rashad Bateman or Greg Newsome, and then Bateman went to the Ravens, to their rival right after the Browns, adds at least a little zest to that pick. But did it give you any second thoughts when it was like, okay, there's Greg Newsome versus Rashad Bateman in theory, and then it's like, man, the Ravens took him right after the Browns didn't?
Well, it's Greg Newsome versus Rashad Bateman in theory, and then it's going to be Greg Newsome versus Rashad Bateman in real life on some Sunday afternoon. I just kind of laughed. I thought it was funny. It was just like absolutely perfect that the Ravens took him. I mean, I made the case for taking the corner. Scott and I were both said that before the pick. So, I don't have any buyer's remorse there. Ellis, I didn't get to hear what you had to say though.
Yeah, really what I told Doug was that I completely understood the Newsome pick, but with Bateman being the following selection, you worry about the Pro Bowl upside. I think a great way to look at these rookies is, are they going to earn a second contract? And what is that second contract going to look like? It'd be interesting to poll executives and see, like, all right, who's going to make more in their second contract, Bateman or Newsome? And then that probably answers your question. And I would lean Bateman if I would ask myself, if I was the 33rd GM, if you will.
So that's in the house. Our mock draft got 25 of the 32 first rounders. So I think we did pretty well.
So we only had 7 guys that didn't get picked.
We had 7 guys that didn't get picked. The highest guy that we drafted that didn't get picked was JOK. Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah is on the board still.
Real quickly about Koramoah.
See, I wish we just call him JOK, but I guess
it's actually probably a good thing the Browns didn't take him.
Yeah, seriously. Clearly, I need help with that. I think this tells you what the league thought of him. They see him as a safety, and I understand all the hype about guys being able to play both spots, but when you just have safety build, you really can't play both spots because you're not going to be a 2-down linebacker and then a cover guy. You're just a cover guy that can roll down in the box sometimes. That's going to probably be the universal surprise. I saw him go as high as like 9 to Denver or something. But again, I think this is telling that of all the teams that needed or could have considered him, for him to fall out all the way out of the first round, I think it looks like he's a safety and will be one in this league.
So let's talk a little bit about what we think might happen next for the Browns before we get out of here. And to everybody who's been with us,
I'm trying to see if we can get Mary Kay to hop on here for a few minutes.
Well, if we can get Mary Kay, we'll
Greg
wait
Newsome
for Mary
is
Kay.
done talking here.
And if we can get Newsome, that'd be great. But thanks to everybody who's been part of the live stream. And if you're listening to this on the podcast, thanks for listening. A couple receivers, Elijah Moore did not go. Rondale Moore from Purdue is out there. Terrace Marshall from LSU is out there. Diami Brown from North Carolina is out there. We talked about Bateman a lot. I think that extra third rounder still exists potentially to help you move up and get somebody. I don't know that they need to take their second rounder and both third rounders. Is anyone particularly interested in a receiver in round 2 and maybe jumping to get a guy that you really like? Or is there something else you're really thinking? And Dan, I think you were gone when it happened. Your guy got picked. Peyton Turner got picked in the first round. You were on him so much that the rest of the league followed you and took him in the first round. But Ellis, should we be thinking receiver now, or is this still going to be a defensive heavy draft in the rest of the picks for the Browns?
I mean, if the Browns can find a way to land Elijah Moore and Greg Newsome, I mean, that's quite the round 1 and 2. I feel like they'd have to move up, but again, with the way JOK just slid it, you just don't know. And I would not have picked Kadarius Toney to go ahead of Rashad Bateman. We are really in the spot where, the discrepancy in picks could be double digit slots, 10, 11, 12 slots. I am going to be fast. That's the number one player I want to see where he falls tomorrow. Is he going to be a top 5 pick in day 2 as Elijah Moore, or is all of a sudden he'll start falling for whatever reason and the Browns can somehow add him to the first round pick they already had, and a guy I would have loved to see them take at 26 being available in the late 30s, maybe early 40s. And now we're talking trade ups, and that's what makes our weekend far from over.
Diami Brown is a guy that Tim has been on. I know that. He's a guy that when I would do the draft pods with him, he was somebody that he would point out. I think there's really intriguing receivers this team is going to be able to get that they can wait on. I don't know, unless they absolutely love Elijah Moore, right? He didn't go while I was gone. Unless they absolutely love that guy. I think they can wait. I think they can wait for somebody to get a little bit closer to them. And then if they want to maybe make that move up, do it. But I don't know if they need to get aggressive and move into the high 30s. I think there's guys there that will be able to help them in the receiving core that also don't put the pressure on oh, you drafted this guy, so now you've got to figure out how to get him on the field. And Scott's going to be telling us how much they hate Rashard Higgins again.
Well, let me throw this at you guys. We don't think they're going to make all these picks, right? We
No.
don't, right. So are we just talking, they're going to trade a 5th for a 4th next year? Is it going to be these little moves that we don't really care about? Or is this is tomorrow or early tomorrow the time you move up for somebody because you have the ammo?
Well, actually, you know what? Let me just say, I don't expect them to make 9 picks, and maybe they do use some of them to move up, or maybe they do punt on a couple of them to next year. But I also think if we're talking about that 7th round pick, that's kind of that guy might not even make the team.
Yeah, but that's
I think the ones that matter are through once we get past 91, then it's kind of okay,
top
we'll
100.
See what happens?
That's what I want.
Maybe they can pick 9 guys.
But that they have an extra 3rd and an extra 4th.
Right. So they have those extra picks in that spot, in those top 110.
Where it matters.
Yep.
I think they could trade, I think I had a trade down. I think the Cardinals don't have a 3rd or 4th round pick in this draft. So maybe there's a team that wants to get up and get a guy in a range, but they don't have a pick. And the Browns trade a 3rd this year for, next year's 3rd or whatever. But I do think sometimes that's the best way. Because you know what? You know how many bad 3rd round picks there are in this league all the time? I think sometimes the best way when you gather an extra 3rd rounder or an extra 4th rounder is ammo.
Yeah.
To all of a sudden, you turn pick 59 into pick 42, and you get a guy that never would have gotten to you that you think can really help your team. And that is an excellent use of that extra third. So like, I'm really interested in that theoretically. Let's run down a couple names while we hope to have Mary Kay on here.
Yeah, I think she's going to be able to jump on here, but yeah.
Okay. She can tell us what she thinks of this Newsome pick. These are Tim's best available players. So I'll run through a group of guys and then you talk about maybe who you're especially interested in. And again, this would, we're talking about the top 10 guys available. Well, the Browns are picking at 59. They're going to have to do something to come get a guy like that. Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, he's Tim's best available. Then Azeez Ojulari, that edge rusher from Georgia. Trevon Moehrig, the safety from TCU. Christian Barmore from Alabama. Tevin Jenkins, the offensive tackle from Oklahoma State. Terrace Marshall, the receiver from LSU. Russo is actually gone. Samuel Cosme, the offensive tackle from Texas. No interest there. Always gone. Jalen Mayfield, offensive tackle. Asante Samuel, corner. Not going to do that probably. Rondale Moore, the receiver from Purdue. Javonte Williams, the running back from North Carolina. Don't think they'll do that. Landon Dickerson, the center from Alabama. Don't think they'll do that. Nick Bolton, the Missouri linebacker. Diami Brown, receiver, North Carolina. Joseph Ossay, edge rusher from Texas. And now we're getting into some guys I don't know who these people are. So is there anybody like who is there an interesting position? Like, are you guys, if I didn't want an edge in the first, maybe I'd take an edge in the second. Receiver, the right safety. What is there? If not a name, what is an area of need? What's a position, Ellis, that you're especially intrigued by for the Browns on day two?
I got to stick with receiver. I understand the holes on the defense and the question marks at linebacker, and they've already addressed corner and how you cannot have enough defensive linemen. But it comes a point where we have to remember what happened in Kansas City. And I get that they're getting Odell Beckham Jr. back, but they just did not have guys that could separate from the slot, outside, off the line of scrimmage. It did not matter. And even if they did get off the line, they didn't expect them to get 10 to 12 yards separation at the top of any of their routes in the intermediate part of the field. So this team needs to add speed, and it needs to add someone who also gives them a dynamic pre-snap, threatening teams laterally. And you can find those guys later than where I think Elijah Moore is going to go, but I think he's the one guy who belongs a tier higher than where he may go right now. So I'm going to keep pounding the drum and sticking with Elijah Moore.
Ellis, can I do the same thing and throw some wide receiver names at you?
Sure.
Okay. I'm going to go past some of these guys, the top guys. Josh Palmer, Tennessee. Jalen Darden is a guy that I've looked into a little bit, real small, but can really do some things with the football in his hands. Let's see who else we have here. So Simi Fehoko.
Yep.
Are any of these names? Do you like any of these names?
I do. I wonder where a guy like Nico Collins, Tylan Wallace.
Nico Collins is on here.
Yeah, those are two guys that are also in this range that I liked as I watched tape on him more. The thing is, when you start getting, I'd say, outside the top like 6 or 7 in receiver, you start seeing a lot of the same traits, and the production then becomes scheme based, and you start wondering about the levels of comp. Basically what I'm trying to say is the evaluation process gets just, in terms of how certain I am that they could help the Browns offense in week 1 of 2021, I grow uncertain. There's really only like 2 or 3 more guys on this list right now that I think could help the Browns push for the Super Bowl like Doug talks about. And I think they're going to go quicker than when the Browns do pick in day 2. So they need to move up if they want a guy that helps them immediately. If it's for the future, then I do like most of those names, and specifically the 2, Nico and Tylan, that I brought up after your list.
Should they be thinking about interior offensive line at all long term? I'm unsure about whether Wyatt Teller is going to be too pricey after 2021 when it's time to keep him here. I don't know. Like, if you believe Nick Harris is the answer, is the next guy up, if you need someone behind those 3 interior guys right now, is that good enough? or if you invested a second or third round pick in an interior offensive lineman now in anticipation of something, would that be something potentially worthwhile, you think?
So I like that theory, Doug, because then that pick could also double as a swing tackle. We don't really know what's going to happen with Chris Hubbard yet, and that would be a good way to both provide long-term security on the interior and improve that swing tackle spot, which we saw how important it was a year ago. It's going to be important every year. These linemen get injured, and especially having a guy that can play both, it's probably a top, I don't know, 10 priority that aside from, the stars you have on the field, when you need to address, spots like a backup quarterback, that swing tackle has a lot of sway, and improving that position is something and we haven't really talked about. I like it.
And I don't want to forget about Drew Forbes, who opted out last year, but I think people still think Wright could be a part of the future. People thought that was a good pick when John Dorsey made that. So I don't know. I mean, but again, that's the kind of stuff we're talking about here.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, do they need a seventh offensive lineman? Is that what they should do in the third round? That's what good teams do. And that's where the Browns are right now. And look who's back. It's our number one draft pick.
She let us off way back when we started at like 3 hours and 20 minutes ago. And now she's going to bring us home here on our show. I'm dropping my phone and all sorts of stuff here. Mary Kay, what did you think of the pick? Let's start with the basics.
Well, you know what? First of all, let me just give you my first impressions of Greg Newsome on the Zoom we just had with him. Boy, what a dynamic personality he is. That was a very, very fun Zoom, and I think he sort of fits with the other guys they're bringing onto this team. They're upbeat. They love football. They're leaders. They're flamboyant, and they're adding some really cool guys to this team. And I think that is going to serve them well as they go along. Now, as we talked about when I was on in the very beginning, we just weren't sure that Greg Newsome and a Caleb Farley were going to be falling to the Browns. But as the draft went along, you could see that it was offense, offense, offense. And it was just coming their way. Greg Newsome was just falling to them, which was pretty darn incredible. And I know that this is a guy they really liked a lot. They had a number of defensive guys on their radar. Some of them went off the board. I know they liked Zaven Collins. I know they liked Caleb Farley. What I don't know is, would they have taken Caleb had he been available? That would have been the very interesting thing to think about there. We don't know that. They liked a number of other guys. Kwity Paye, I think, is somebody that they would have been interested in. But I think this went exactly how they hoped it would go. I mean, I think they wanted to come away with one of the top cornerbacks in this draft. They got their guy, and I don't think they can be any happier than they are right now.
Eric K., what do you think this battle will be like between Greg Newsome and Greedy Williams at that other outside corner spot opposite Denzel? Is that what we should assume this is going to be before in camp before the season?
I would think so, but really, realistically, when you draft a cornerback in the first round, particularly a cornerback who is very, very confident and fancies himself to be the best cornerback in this draft, which I think we might have talked about that before. I mean, I know they all do. I mean, you kind of have to. But, when you take a cornerback in the first round, they're going to start. That's just how it goes. Unless something doesn't go right, or, I just think he's probably going to end up starting for a couple of reasons. First of all, he's their draft pick. Greedy Williams was not their draft pick. Now it's going to bring out the best in them, and they will have competition. But I think we've all been covering football long enough to see the writing on the wall when things like this happen. And Greedy was also going to be expected to take a big step up in his second year. Now, having said that, you need 3 really good outside cornerbacks. I mean, you just do. Not only because of the way your alignment is going to go, but because of injuries. Denzel misses 3 games a year or 4 games. We don't know about Greedy's health. He's coming along really well. So you're going to need all these guys. And, Greedy, one of the coolest things I thought he did right away was welcome Greg Newsome to the land. I thought that was awesome. Good for Greedy. He's a really, really good guy. And, I hope he can give Greg Newsome a real unbelievable run for his money. And if he does, then they'll all be the better for it. But I think we all know how things work out with first round picks.
Mary Kay, what do you think when Rashad Bateman goes to the Ravens 1 pick later?
Well, you know what? I'll tell you. I thought the same, early on in the draft when the Bengals got Jamar Chase, I was like, oh, Browns better get that cornerback. We talked about that on the early part of the pod, but and then the same thing with Bateman, just another good, big, solid receiver that these guys are going to have to contend with. And I even asked Andrew Berry about that. Did it confirm for you that you needed to do this? But I think we all knew heading in that they had to get another good, really good outside cornerback. Was it going to be in the first round? We weren't sure about that, but we knew they really had to get one somehow. It was the only thing that we could consider sort of a hole on this defense, right? I mean, there are spots where you could upgrade, but that was an area where it was like, something's got to happen here. And it did. It makes so much sense. And he's going to come in handy against Joe and Jamar, Lamar and Rashad. This is going to work out pretty well for the Browns.
Okay. I think we've hit the wall here, right? Mary Kay, you haven't been on as long as us, so I don't know if you have a final thought or not, but I want to let you say if you have anything you need to say. I want you to say it before we sign off here.
Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, as they were getting towards the pick, I was starting to think, are they going to take Elijah Moore? I mean, did that go through anybody's mind?
Yes, there was some discussion about it.
Yeah. So, that was the only other thing, but I guessed right because I started quickly just typing a few Greg Newsome graphs to have that 0 story up that we always have to do. And fortunately I made the right pick there and got, something up right away. Like, unfortunately we have to do within seconds, but anyway, so yeah, that was the only other thought that I had was, are they going to go with their next little Odell Beckham Jr. guy? So no, good night for Andrew. He needs to get some sleep.
Yes, he does. We all do, although we're all just getting started here.
Yeah.
But real quick.
But we didn't have a baby. He
That's
had
true.
a baby. That's why he needs to sleep. What time was his baby born?
8
something.
12 hours before the draft started.
But then when you have a baby at 8:00 in the morning, I mean, it's not like you're asleep at 6:30 and you wake up and have a baby.
No.
Like he's probably 24 hours,
Yes.
no sleep now, right?
Right. Absolutely. 100%. Yes.
Life gets real, man.
Yeah.
Alice, who'd you have at 59 in your How the Browns Win the Draft?
Oh, who did I have them at 59? It had to
My
have been,
guy's gone.
Yeah, it had to have been. I think, you know what? It was Elijah Moore. It was before I really realized he was going to maybe be a first round pick, which he isn't now. So again, it's the variance of these guys. I don't know where he's going to go. If he's there at 59, then I'll have some Dan Lobby prediction skills, and we'll go 2 for 2 here, Dan.
All right.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Dan, you get to take the victory lap. You got your guy.
No, exciting. Okay. So appreciate everybody out there that's still hanging with us on YouTube. We're going to try and do this again tomorrow. We'll get those details out there. And of course, if you're listening on the pod, this is a long pod, but I hope you liked it. Trying something to kind of give you that live reaction to everything that happened here tonight during round 1 of the draft. So we got a full weekend ahead of us. We'll let everybody go. Thanks for listening, folks.